Yes.
This is a regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for 6 December. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times, Star Ledger, and Herald News. This is a public hearing in which any members of the public are welcome to attend. The meeting agenda is available on the Montclair website as a link to the township's YouTube channel, where the hearing can be viewed live or after the fact. The hearing is also being televised on Channel 34. We will now go for roll call. William Harrison,
Here.
John McCullough,
Present.
John Caulfield,
Here.
Jay Church,
Here.
Angela Harris,
Here.
Jerry Simon, Sebastian Vieira,
Here.
Janice Talley, Michael Sullivan.
Here.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
We have the minutes of the November 15th meeting. I have a couple of changes. On page 1, just in terms of who was what, I think Ms. Harris and Mr. Simon should be listed as excused since they alerted us that they would not be here. And on page 2, line 37, after use variance for the dormer, then replace which with since a use variance for the building, and then continue as was previously granted. And then on page 3, line 17, replace building with apartments. The first one. And line 29, put after perspective the change, insert to residential. And that's all the changes I have. Anyone else with any changes to the minutes?
As amended.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions?
Abstain?
Then we have the resolution for the property on Windsor Place. I have a couple of changes and then a long one which I'll read but give to her later so we don't have to do it. Number 1 on page 1, it should be Upper Mountain, and then it should be Upper Mountain and Highland Avenues, plural. And then I want to insert a third finding, which would read, the addition will be no closer to the eastern side property line than the existing house and will not increase the existing width of the house. I don't have any other changes to the resolution. Does anyone else have any changes? If not, someone want to move the resolution with those changes?
I'll move the resolution with the changes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any no, any abstentions?
Abstain?
Okay, and then we have the meeting schedule for next year. I'm going to try and do, so I gather we can't meet on the 3rd because we will not have the ability to be televised.
Right, so I
So we'll
suggest we
delete that.
cancel that.
Okay.
Get to the,
We can meet in secret and really excite the Open Public Meetings Act people. Then my understanding is Rick is not available on May 15th, so we'll cancel that, and which is good because I was going to suggest we had too many meetings at the beginning of the year. Then I have a question. You have July 10th and July 24th, and I know why we're not doing July 3rd, but I'm not sure why not just have one meeting in July on 17th, which would be our normal meeting date.
I think it's an excellent idea. Won't disagree with that.
Okay, so delete July 10 and July 24 and put July 17th. Questioning, but then we're having one meeting a month in October and November about meeting Labor Day week, but I guess leave it on and we'll see how the world progresses. Anyone else have any thoughts on or changes to the proposed schedule for next year?
One thing I would just request that when we receive notice set for our next meeting, that we receive an updated list of the calendar for 2024.
Yeah, once what we'll do is hopefully this will be adopted tonight, and then we'll go back, we'll edit it, we'll publish it, and we'll give everybody a copy for the next meeting.
Okay, so anyone want to move the scheduled meetings for next year as amended?
So move as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then we have a postponement to announce.
So the application 2866, 167 Harrison Avenue, is carried to January 17th, 2024
At 7:30 PM.
at 7:30 p.m.
And there will not be any further announcement, any further notice of the hearing, so if you're here for that application, mark your calendars, mark your phones, whatever, that the hearing will be on January 17th, this room, starting at 7:30. Okay, then the first application we're going to hear tonight is for the Montclair Kimberley Academy Foundation for property at 12-36 Lloyd Road. This is an application for site plan approval and conditional use approval to construct an 8,850 square foot addition to an existing school building on the property to provide additional classroom space. The applicant also proposes to construct a new driveway on the south side of the property and various other improvements. Property is located in the RO Mountainside Residential Zone and is designated on the township tax maps as Block 302, Lot 16. The applicant is, in addition to site plan and conditional use approval, the applicant is also seeking variance from the conditional use requirements set forth in Montclair Code Section 347-12A6 to permit driveways within 200 feet of the intersection of Lloyd Road and Parkhurst Place, whereas the ordinance requires no driveway open into a street less than 200 feet from an intersecting street. A variance from Montclair Code from a conditional use requirement set forth in Section 347-12A6 to permit driveways to be separated by less than 150 feet, whereas the ordinance requires the driveways to be separated by at least 150 feet. And if required, a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-12A9 to permit 159 parking spaces on the property, whereas a greater number of parking spaces may be required. I assume the property is tax exempt, but is the notice in order?
We did review the notice, it is in order.
Okay. Mr. Trembulack, you want to give your appearance and proceed?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Trembulack, appearing this evening on behalf of Montclair Kimberley Academy Foundation. As the notice indicates, this is an application for site plan approval and variances involving the MKA Upper School campus located at 12-36 Lloyd Road. There are basically two primary components of the site plan that we're presenting this evening. The first involves the construction of an 8,850 square foot addition to an existing building on the property in order to provide additional space and better facilities for the high school STEM or STEM program. The second component of the plan before you involves the construction of a new one-way driveway on the south side of the property, which is intended to provide ingress from Lloyd Road to the existing parking area in the rear of the property. The purpose of the driveway is to provide for better on-site circulation and to reduce, if not eliminate, the need for buses and other vehicles to park on Lloyd Road, which occasionally occurs and causes congestion, for both the school as well as neighboring properties and vehicles traveling on Lloyd Road. And we think that's a significant improvement to the site. And those are the two basic components of the plan this evening. I think it's important to point out, as our witnesses will testify to, that although the school is seeking to expand one of the buildings on the property, there are no plans whatsoever and no intention to grow or expand the school's existing student population, which consists of approximately 450 students. The number of students attending the school will remain the same, and there will similarly be no increase whatsoever in the number of faculty members or staff as a result of the proposed addition. Accordingly, the project will not generate any additional traffic or generate any increased demand for parking. And for those reasons, we are requesting a waiver from the requirement of the conditional use ordinance that provides for providing a parking plan or a traffic study as part of an application. Since there are no changes to existing traffic or parking, we would hope that the board would agree with us that a waiver seems to be appropriate there. Property is located in the RO Mountainside Residential Zone District, and as this board knows from prior applications for MKA and I'm sure other private schools, schools are permitted as conditional uses in all residential zoning districts in the township of Montclair. The zoning ordinance, specifically section 12, enumerates 12 conditions which must be satisfied by all schools. We comply with 11. Well, there are some existing nonconformities which are not being exacerbated in any way by this application. There's only one condition that we do not meet, and that pertains to the requirement that driveways be separated by at least 150 feet. We're slightly less than that with the new driveway that we're proposing to be installed. So that requires a conditional use variance, which, as you know, is a D3 variance, which is the reason why this board has jurisdiction over this site plan application. We also need a C1 variance, which I was not aware of and did not notice for, but I think we have a catch-all notice provision in my notice should be sufficient, but we are proposing retaining walls that exceed the height requirement in the ordinance. It's the only way that this loop road could be instructed, going basically up the mountain around the building and leading to the parking area in the rear. So that's the only other variance we're requesting. Again, there's one or two, I think, additional waivers that are minor in nature. I have three witnesses to present. Sitting to my right is Katherine Davidson, who you've known from prior applications, who will testify on behalf of the school. Just give a general overview as to what the plans are, what the reason is for this project, and what the school is looking to accomplish. And then we'll have our project architect, Robert Douglas, discuss the architectural plans as well as the landscape plan and the tree removal plan that he prepared. And then finally, we'll have our site engineer, Brian Perry of Pannoni Engineering, to review the site plan. So, having said that, unless the board has any preliminary questions for me, I would call Katherine Davidson and ask that she be sworn in.
Before we do that, I'm just going to have our two board professionals sworn in also. Would you raise your right hand? So you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your names and positions with the board.
Janice Talley, secretary to the board, or assistant secretary, I'm not sure. Secretary, okay.
Hussein Farva, assistant planner, secretary to the board.
All right, Ms. Davidson, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board? State your name and address, please.
Katherine Davidson, 34 Glenwood Road, Montclair.
Thank you.
Ms. Davison, you've testified before this board previously on 2 or 3 other applications that I'm aware of. Is it fair to say that you're still employed by Montclair Kimberley Academy?
Yes.
Okay, and remind us what your position is with the school?
Ms. Davidson, maybe you could pull the mic a little closer.
Okay,
and
sorry.
speak up.
Yep. So, yes, I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
Okay. And are you responsible for overseeing this project on behalf of the school?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What I'd like you to do is just explain to the board in general terms the improvements that MKA is proposing for the high school campus and the reasons or the purpose of those improvements.
Yeah. So, there's, as Alan had,
Go ahead.
as Alan had explained, there's basically 2 parts to the project. The first is an improvement and expansion of the school's science and math or STEM facilities. I think since the building, or since this wing was built in the 1960s, I think there's been sort of, obviously STEM teaching has evolved significantly, and our facilities needs today are very different from when this space was built, sort of almost 60 years ago. Our school's currently using a number of repurposed classrooms and basement areas for our science labs, which were never really intended for this purpose. We've been limping through with those facilities. I think a renovated and the additional space will provide the ability for us to have larger labs with more collaborative learning spaces, really improved safety features in the building. Right now we have very poor and limited ventilation, particularly in those laboratories, which is really an important factor of those types of spaces, and better preparation rooms and chemical storage and disposal facilities, which this building really just wasn't built to accommodate. And also really having dedicated spaces for sort of not just our program, but extracurricular activities of the students, things like our robotics program, computer science, environmental science labs, and things like that, which this building just wasn't built to accommodate. Initially when we sort of set about this project, we tried to work really hard to keep the program within the existing footprint, but it became really apparent, particularly with things like the ventilation needs, that just wasn't, and the existing kind of structure that we're dealing with, that just wasn't going to be possible in terms of the square footage that we had and what we were trying to accomplish. So as we were proposing renovating the existing building, which is I think 19,000 square feet, and adding an additional 8,500 square feet. There's no intention to add students to the school or staff. The project really addresses the needs of our existing students and our existing program, which have long outgrown this existing facility. The second part of the project is to add the sort of one-way access road to really improve site circulation and really to address some safety concerns we have about our car line on Lloyd Road. I mean, the road's intended specifically for bus traffic and for larger buses, and will provide a bus drop-off and a waiting area at the back of our campus. And this sort of actually now occurs on Lloyd Road during our car line. So if we have buses, they stack up in our car line and then sit there and wait. So not moving on, so kind of cars have to go round them, and that's really when we get a condition when the car line starts backing up onto Bloomfield Avenue, because people kind of pull in expecting the bus to move off, and really it sort of creates a really hazardous situation. It also provides really important emergency vehicle access to the back of our campus, which right now is really limited because it's just on one side of our campus, and it's actually very difficult for those sort of trucks to come up that side of the campus, which we also would kind of think would be a valuable addition. And finally, it would allow us, although we're intending for this road to really serve during the school day bus traffic, it would allow things like we have a community swimming program, Cougar Aquatics, which is open to sort of young children outside of the school. It would allow a drop-off point for that type of activity for them to enter the gym from behind the school, whereas right now they have to either park in Walden and cross the road, often at night, or they have to kind of actually come into our car line, which creates a sort of worse situation in the car line. So it would give us an opportunity to sort of provide a different entryway for that particular program, which has younger children.
So the buses that currently queue up in front of the school on Lloyd Road, the intention would be after this new driveway or loop road leading to the back is installed, that if the buses queue up, they would be queuing up in that driveway rather than
Yes,
on
so
the
that's kind
public
of
street.
because especially they tend to be for like trips or athletic things. So it's not like the bus is dropping kids off and heading on its way. They're sitting there and waiting, often for the start of school. So they don't move out and clear out during car line. They just sit in car line because we have nowhere else to stage the buses. So that's kind of like for us having a place where we can stage the buses that doesn't impact like pick up and drop off is like would be really beneficial. Because right now when you pull up from Bloomfield Avenue, if there's a bus, or even in the afternoon if it's an athletics bus going somewhere that's waiting for kids, so it's not heading out anytime soon, you know, even the cars that come in, you have no way of knowing that the bus is necessarily not going to move off. So it sort of really creates a kind of really poor condition that we're trying to address by giving them an alternate route.
Okay. So you've indicated that the purpose of the addition to the STEM building was to provide better facilities, and that there's no intention to grow the student population beyond its current population, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Would there be any increase in the number of faculty members or staff?
No.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you wouldn't anticipate there would be any additional traffic going to or coming to the school than
No.
what currently exists? Any need for additional parking facilities?
No.
If you would, just even though we're really not proposing any changes whatsoever to the parking facilities, can you just explain to the board where the parking is located that serves the high school campus?
Yes, so we have 3 locations for parking. So there's an area behind the school, which is sort of 2 tiers of parking. And then we also, in addition, have an easement from the township to use the parking on Lloyd Road. And then we have an off-site parking facility next to our field. It's actually on Walden Place. There's a 3rd parking lot that serves the school. So the parking is located in 3 locations.
Okay. I'd like to just offer, which I've marked as Exhibit A1, the easement with the town of Montclair, which dates back to 1995, which deals with those Lloyd Road parking spaces, because it was an item that Janice Talley mentioned in her review memorandum. Couple of final questions. There's a single-family home located on the south side of the school campus, correct?
Yes.
All right. That home is owned by MKA?
Yes.
And who lives there?
The head of school, Nigel
Okay.
Furlong.
All right. And the driveway that,
The head of school, Nigel Furlong.
okay. And there's a driveway that was mentioned in an engineering memo that was sort of encroached upon, or some piping installed, that's the driveway that serves that house, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so all those facilities are owned by MKA?
Yes.
Okay. Last question. I know the school typically does some outreach to the neighbors before an application comes before this board. Did you do any of that in connection with this application?
Yes, we hosted an event for neighbours on November 11th, so they could review the plans. We were there, and also we invited our architect to give a presentation so they could provide input and feedback.
And approximately how many neighbors attended that meeting?
We had 5.
Okay, all right. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Ms. Davidson. Just a few questions around the context of this project. So, first of all, let me pick up on that last note that Mr. Tremblay was asking, and with reference to the neighbors. And you had an opportunity to visit with some of the neighbors. Has there been any history of difficult or challenging relations with the neighbors?
I think we have a pretty good relationship with our neighbours, and especially around this campus. You know, I think it's always challenging to live next to a school. There's always issues around the car line and kind of the, it's sort of kind of a disruption to the neighbourhood. And, the parking issue with students, is always a challenge, I think, for any school in Montclair. But I think that we try and work really, kind of sort of hard to be good neighbours and to be responsive when issues come up and to sort of, mitigate those conditions as much as we can. So we're certainly, and as part of our outreach, we certainly put all our contact information. We kind of encourage them to reach out even if they couldn't come to the meeting. So we had, I think, 1 or 2 neighbours actually called after the meeting to go through questions they had with the plans. So we sort of gave them a contact person. And I think we try and work, we try and sort of be the best neighbours that we can be, given the fact that, there's 450 high school students at the end of their street.
So I'll certainly stay away from the language of complaints. It is normal, obviously, that there would be concerns. And I'm just wondering, in terms of, as you and your team have gone through the process of planning for this project, you've taken into consideration concerns that you may have heard from the neighbors through the years.
Yeah, I think sort of one of the reasons for looking at the loop road or the access road is to really think about how we can improve our car line. Because, and not just for our near neighbours too and their access, and certainly our neighbours coming up Parkhurst, when they can't turn up their street and things, but they've got no other way of accessing the house, certainly to, in fact, they were some of the neighbours who came to the meeting were actually really pleased to see some attempt to address that condition, like to be able to keep a car line moving. So I think that's why we're looking at that road in terms of ways that we can kind of improve those conditions, given the site that we have.
Mm-hmm. I noticed, looking at the history of, some of the previous resolutions that have come before the township in the evolution of the school, that the census, the student census was always a point of conversation. And at one point, I don't know if it's still true, that MKA had to report to the township the number of students. I don't know if that's still applicable, probably not, but clearly, in terms of the evolution, the growth of the school has been pretty modest through the years. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we've had a very stable enrollment. So we've been, around 1,000. I think we're like 1,050. Kind of within that band across the 3 schools, which there isn't. And I think we've been pretty much that size since we merged, like in 1974. So it's and that is. Part of the being fairly land-bound where we are, I think that's sort of, and it's served us well. We have no intention of being bigger. There's no kind of, I think for us, we want to maintain the school at its size and kind of, deliver our mission as effectively as we can to our students who are with us.
Mm-hmm. And the school started off as a boys' school and now has become co-ed?
Yeah, so we're actually a merger between Montclair Academy, which is on the location on Lloyd Road, and then our middle school was Kimberley Academy, which was a girls' school, and they merged in 1974.
Mm-hmm. So how has that sort of changed the nature of how the building has been used through the years?
Well, I think that's one of the challenges of this existing building, or that 1960s building, is it was built for 350 boys. so squeeze it, sort of that's why one of the reasons why it's been such a challenge to reimagine or renovate this space in, with today's classroom sizes and sort of facilities, for a facility that was built with a very different population in mind. Mm-hmm. So I think that has worked differently and better in other parts of the school, but I think this is pretty much the last area of the school where, kind of what we have really isn't working, that it was constructed in sort of the late 1960s, and it was just built when teaching and learning looked very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly have, some specific questions about the facilities and how they can or are planned to effectively accommodate that changing demographic of the school. Mm-hmm. And I'll ask that with one of the other witnesses, I think Mr. Douglas, so I'll probably address that with him. But you mentioned that this project will not result in an increase in the number of students or staff. And I'm going to assume, with respect to the staff, that means that you're not anticipating an increase of staff specifically because of this project. It doesn't mean that at some point in the future that there could be a vision for more staffing based on the academic programs and other services of the institution. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as a result of this project, we don't anticipate an increase in the faculty or staff at the upper school.
And that would, when I say staff, I mean that would be the faculty as well as
Yeah.
other service professionals that.
Yes.
And so do you feel that, would you anticipate that, if at some point in the future, when you're sort of living into the space and you're able to envision ways in which more staff, again inclusively, would be required, that the parking that you've currently envisioned would be sufficient to meet that need? Or do you think that's something that would require review at a later time?
So I think this is actually the campus where we have the most robust parking that we have across all 3 campuses. So it's actually a campus where, in terms of faculty and staff parking, it actually functions really well. We have visitor spaces that are out in the front in Lloyd Road. So it's not, I think where we feel a crunch in parking is like at large events, which is never going to, so there are things that we have that we host for the community, and there are things that we host for our community, like homecoming and, I think Montclair Film Festival uses our auditorium for events and things like that, and that's where we really feel the crunch in our parking situation, is those larger community events that extend beyond the upper school community. So on a day-to-day basis, when I'm visiting upper school, it is easy for me to find a parking space, unlike situations where we have maybe at like our middle school, where the parking is really a lot more tight, and it's a much it's a much different campus. It is a campus that we actually are able to give students their parking spaces in Walden, so they get assigned parking when the seniors leave. So an entire year plus of students get parking spaces. Whoever applies to them gets parking spaces. So we're able to sort of, I think, really cope very well with kind of the parking that we have at that site on a day-to-day basis. I think when we have issues with parking, it's really these bigger, sort of much larger community events. Like we have a gathering there, which is all 3 campuses, those types of things,
Mm-hmm.
where we're pulling people from outside that upper school community.
Mm-hmm. So when you have athletic activities on the field, I guess the parking in the rear of the building is utilized as well as on Lloyd Road?
Yeah, and Walden. I think Walden has really good access. So that tends to be the primary kind of, when we have things on Van Brunt, it's at the sort of same level as the field. So that's the kind of field that gets used a lot for athletics activities or when we have games. But, I think depending on the time, if it's a homecoming game, or like depending on the kind of the draw, or even if it's a Montclair High game, they tend to draw a lot more people, and those are kind of places where we're using a lot more. But those tends to happen out of school hours, when the kind of faculty parking's free. So there's actually parking behind the building. So, I think games and things, just depending on attendance, vary. But they normally, I think the parking is fine. It's more kind of just the general traffic and drop-off that just brings busyness to the area.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the gymnasium. Is that located in that round building?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's fairly close to Lloyd Road in terms of the driveway. I guess the reason why I'm asking is because you talked about the buses would be dropping younger children off at that location.
Yeah, so actually we have a swimming pool in the basement of the gym. So they use the swimming pool. So it's a kind of community swim program that happens at the end of the school day. So right now, clearly that's like when they're getting dropped off and when they're getting picked up is at night. So I think that's been a big safety concern for us, because they make their way across that crosswalk, because it's too busy on Lloyd Road to have their car line run as well. It's also an incredibly steep hill, so it's not an easy, it's actually quite a different, the gym is, particularly in bad weather, that can be it can be a pretty sort of quite a trek up that hill. So it's not it's in some so having a loop road around the back for those young children would be very helpful. Also for people who have, like, in terms of access, like ADA access, it'd make it a much easier place to try and come on campus too.
So in terms of the existing buildings, the new building that you're proposing, which is quite impressive and it certainly is substantial, does that translate then into somewhat of a repurposing of the existing buildings?
It's actually going to be So the whole project that you're seeing is actually the renovated space and the new space combined. So I think it is 18,000 square feet of existing building and 8,500 of additional space. So it is things like, I mean, so right now, you know, we have a research science program which shares a space with a chemistry lab. So we don't have a dedicated space. We don't have a dedicated robotics space. We don't have a dedicated environmental science lab. You know, one of our chemistry labs is they're sort of splitting like locations, and they're labs that were they're rooms that were never intended to be labs. They sort of have been repurposed and sort of really are not kind of the right size. They don't have adequate preparation rooms next to them. They're just not set up. They don't have proper chemical storage. So a lot of the layout is actually kind of reconfiguring the lab space to actually make them really what would be a normal size lab right now, as opposed to really we've squeezed program into spaces that really aren't built for that, and aren't, you know, kind of wouldn't meet code if you were putting those spaces in today in terms of ventilation and kind of how the chemical storage is organized and just things like that. So there is, in the labs, there is like, you know, they actually have shared preparation spaces between the labs that are properly sized, that have locked and secure chemical storage. You know, that takes up a lot of the space, and then the labs are just bigger. So I think the overall building adds 1 laboratory and 2 classrooms compared to our existing space. So although it might look like there's a lot more in there, we're really getting an environmental science lab, and we're getting 2 additional classrooms. I think because one of the other trends we've seen is just a higher percentage of our students taking more STEM classes, so particularly things like computer science, where they double up in subjects. So it's not that we have more students, and it's not that we can put that program somewhere else, that they might take 6 classes rather than 5. And when they take that class overload, it's often a science or a math or a computer science class. So we're just seeing a lot more subscription, and things like extracurricular activities like robotics and clubs and coding clubs really don't have, right now we don't have a home for that in that building.
Okay.
So it's actually sort of, the robotics area is actually adding, they're using a sort of basement, kind of almost like a hallway, which is in the existing building, but it's actually giving it a place that they can actually kind of run that club, because it actually needs a reason. They compete in like competitions, so it's actually giving them a purpose, a dedicated space where that program can exist, which we simply don't have right now.
Right. I think I just have 2 more questions for you. So one is just in terms of chemical storage, in terms of the plan for that, given the new facilities, do you feel comfortable in assuring the neighborhood that there would be no concern about those chemicals that are being housed within school facilities?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable. I mean, they're sort of, it's pretty much things like, you know, acids and bases being separated. You know, so it's sort of very, very normal and regular kind of things that you'd see in a household and also in a school lab. So they're not sort of, you know, they're corrosive rather than dangerous. Like, so they're things that, but in terms of, you know, there's requirements around them being, you know, disposed of properly and stored correctly. And, you know, right now in the spaces that we're in, that's challenging. We do it, but it's in kind of not really sort of easy to access ways. So they might be in a locked cabinet in a room, as opposed to they should, you know, if you were designing things from scratch, you'd have a preparation room that's somewhere that teachers were in, and assigned storage next to it where everything's stored correctly.
So my last question is just, thank you. My last question is related to the intent of this facility for STEM, and that is, and you've already alluded to I think what probably a lot of us are already aware of, which is that there's a growing interest amongst young people around technology, and we hear a lot about AI and all kinds of things going on. So would you say that what's being proposed in terms of this facility would be enabling MKA to be more on sort of the front edge or the cutting edge of STEM research on the secondary school level, that you know, allowing it to be you know, more competitive than it currently is now?
Yeah, I think it's For us, it's about, and I think it's a mix between sort of we have existing program that really isn't well served in the space that we have, and being able to really not promote that, but really people being able to see what our kids are doing and actually allow those kids to allow our students to really flourish and sort of kind of really benefit from our curriculum. I think anything we do is about sort of continuing to advance our program and continuing to evolve, and supporting our mission in terms of kind of delivering an excellent education to the students who enroll.
Okay.
So
And I guess I should ask, since you are the CFO, I should ask, is it your view that, given, again, the size of this project and the intent of its use, and that this is something which is financially sustainable well into the future?
yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Harris?
You mentioned the aquatics program.
Mhm.
Are there other programs that are hosted in this building that are not for MKA students?
So that's actually, in the swimming pool. So right now it's primarily aquatics. Occasionally we've hosted, not in the STEM building, but in our arts wing, we've hosted programs with the Montclair Art Museum. So where opportunities arise that we're able to accommodate, I think we certainly like to sort of we welcome the community and their ability to use the program. So we certainly partner with Montclair Film Festival. We've hosted films and other events. I'm trying to think. So I'm just checking in, because I think on our sort of other campuses we have summer camp programs that run for younger children, which are open to the town, and we have a lot of people from Montclair who participate in those programs at middle school and primary school. I think because of the age of students, sort of something like camp has been, and because of the way the campus is, it's like a very steep campus, so it's not an area that we have playgrounds and kind of fields accessible for kind of young children. But I think certainly in terms of in this facility, I think we have talked about if there are ways of bringing on summer program that we could open to the town. That's something that we're sort of really interested in doing in terms of making, being able to kind of promote programs that would not be just for our students, but for students outside of MKA, particularly around STEM programming, because I know there's a lot of interest in this area to kind of access that type of programming.
So for the most part, though, these programs would take place after the school day, so they're...
Yeah, so they wouldn't be
Wouldn't really
I think
affect the
for us it's
traffic.
on that particular campus, because it's a high school and there's athletics and there's clubs and things that run after school, it's really hard for us to accommodate, and I think, it's kind of in the school day, it tends to be focused on school. I think when we have things like the aquatics program, it's outside of the school day. It's a way that we can accommodate a program that doesn't impact the sort of rest of the rest of town, and that's a program we've been running for a very long time at MKA. I think when we do other things, it's sort of on the weekends, and it tends to be things where there's really a kind of a community benefit or a community component that we feel is sort of benefiting our neighbours.
Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Yep. How many buses are there for the pick up and drop off?
So we have, I think it is 5 small buses that run to the school right now, and some of those, actually it's 3 small buses, and they can run in there's a small loop at the front of the building. It's just the larger buses can't run up there. So there's 2 kind of shuttle buses, one that runs from Short Hills and Livingston, and there's one that comes from West Orange or South Orange and Maplewood that drop off, and they drop off in the front of the building because they can't kind of go on the existing driveways. And then in the morning, if there's trips, so if there's a grade going somewhere, that's really where we have an issue, is there'll be sort of there can be 2 or 3 buses, and just even having 1 or 2 buses on Lloyd Road, it consumes a lot of the road. Yeah, so it takes 8 car places out, and as I said, it just causes this situation where people pull in. They don't realise the bus isn't moving. Particularly for us, it's not necessarily the shuttle buses that are the issue, because they stop, they drop kids off and they leave. It's the buses that are loading for a trip. So in the afternoon for athletics, for any away games, all the buses queue up on Lloyd Road. And it creates this condition that when you pull in off Bloomfield, you'll get to a part of there can be clear space in front of the bus, depending on when they've been able to pull in the car line. that people just don't know that the bus isn't moving, so then cars get stuck behind it, it backs onto Bloomfield and just becomes a condition where then people finally realise the bus isn't moving and they drive around. So during sports season, if we have a number of away games, that can be challenging. Or if we have a team coming to campus, that can be challenging.
Okay. When the buses, the buses for the, to go to the sports things after school, when they pick, if they get on the car line on Lloyd, then they just go straight past the school on Lloyd? They don't do a K-turn or get back on Bloomfield, right? They go kind of, I would imagine they go straight through Lloyd. And
Yeah, they go straight through Lloyd, yeah.
Is there any, is there any concern that you might have thought about? Like now we're going to have buses coming in the back and coming back and coming back on Lloyd, but now they're going to be coming in the other direction. Like, was there any thought of maybe that, you know, because Lloyd Road is like acting like a one-way somehow, you know, all the traffic is going in one direction, now we're going to have traffic coming the other direction.
So I think because it's quite close to the junction, so right now faculty all the cars from our back parking lot come out that way anyway, so it is a sort of fairly recognised kind of route of traffic. And I think it is, you know, there are buses, but it's not a constant stream of buses, it's sort of 2 or 3 buses, and they tend to wait for school to dismiss, so it tends to be like, that's the problem is that they don't move off during car line, is that they sit there waiting for kids to come out of class, and then they sit there for 20 minutes for the team to turn up, and then they move off.
Gotcha.
So they kind of like, they consume just a kind of amount of space on Lloyd Road, so it means our car line just has less places to stack cars and move off. So, you know, I think there's a number of buses, will be coming down, but it's not a constant stream of buses. And right now, because I think, you know, there are already cars and traffic coming out because that's where teachers come out from school. So and I think people are used to seeing that traffic flow, and it happens really close to the light as well. So they're almost used to like leaving spaces for cars to come out. So in some ways, you know, it's sort of, and it will actually also enable right now when visiting teams come for athletics, they come and either they wait on Lloyd Road or sometimes they'll go around and park in Walden, but that's fairly unusual. So they'll kind of park on Lloyd Road, like further down the street, which isn't great for neighbours either. So it will actually enable them to pull up when our car park is empty at the top, like, and wait for students, like in an area that's not in front of someone's house or not on Lloyd Road. So it will give them easy access to another parking lot. So yeah, I think it's something that we're sort of trying to kind of mitigate some of those conditions that arise on Lloyd Road.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
I'm looking at the site when I was over there Saturday. I suppose that the road that you're going to use to go around starts at the south end of the campus and goes up. That's a pretty steep hill.
It's a very steep hill.
Is that going to be degraded? Or is it going to remain steep like that?
So there's going to be a retaining wall at the back, so it's going to...
But are you going to drop the road to try to level it off a bit? I mean, you're going like this almost.
So
Might be a better
question for the engineer.
Okay, let me ask the engineer. Okay. So that's all I have here.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you clarify, regarding the traffic issues, were they identified by feedback from parents, from neighbors, by a professional?
I think it's been a concern of the neighbours, because I think if you live in that area, if you live around a school and there's a car line, I think it's certainly an issue that our neighbours have talked about. So when we've actually talked about the plan, there's positive feedback we've got about the plan in terms of alleviating some of those conditions, and some of it has just been observation. So we have, you know, in an attempt to make car line move more smoothly, we actually staff the car line. There's 2 security people who are out there in the morning who just observe, who've observed those conditions. And I think from parents as well, it's a comment from our parents that when the bus is in the car line, I mean, you can tell when there's a bus in the morning, for instance, if there's a bus on campus, like waiting for a trip, it instantly impacts Bloomfield Avenue in terms of like that left-hand turn into kind of Lloyd Road backing up and people not being able to get round and then that backs onto Bloomfield Avenue and creates like a, additional traffic kind of, that isn't moving out of the way, so it kind of closes up one of the lanes on Bloomfield Avenue because people can't make the left-hand turn because there's just nowhere to turn to.
And as far as you're concerned, really the goal is to mitigate these issues.
Yeah, I think, it's to mitigate kind of the bus conditions. It's also to provide, like right now, in terms of emergency vehicle access and life safety access, there is, to be able to provide a better route for like a fire truck or something to get to the back of the campus is also a part of the goal of the road, in terms of just really that access is pretty limited, and that end of the building has sort of no access.
Okay. And I guess the other question is that I noticed that the design incorporates LEED standards, so energy efficiency. Is that something that was, I guess, a goal from the school, or?
Yeah, I think that, where we can, I think it's very much a priority for the building to make it as environmentally sustainable as possible. And I think that the architect can very much talk about those efforts that we've made. So we're hoping to get LEED Gold for this building as a minimum. And I think kind of where we've been able to make choices that are more sustainable, we've definitely tried to make those choices.
Thank you.
For a couple reasons, I want to establish number of students and the number of faculty and staff. So the one place in the application, it said 450 existing students, and then I think Mr. Trembulac in his introduction said 470, but how many students currently exist?
It's 455.
455?
Yes,
And what is the maximum number of students you've had?
that's the maximum.
And then how many faculty and staff?
92,
And is that the maximum you've had?
yes.
Okay. Mr. Trembulac submitted with the application 3 prior resolutions, that one from this board and 2 from the planning board. Are you aware if there are any other approvals for the school?
No,
Okay, and are you familiar with those approvals?
I think they predate me.
Because I guess the 1962 approval from this board that was ratified by the governing body had a number of conditions in it that, I'll say it nicely, or, seem to be not quite. So there was a condition that limited the school to 350 students. Do you know if that was ever modified?
I'm not aware.
Okay, and then, as Mr. McCullough pointed out, there was also a condition that you file annually with the number of students as of October 15th of each year. I'm assuming that has not been followed.
We do register with the state of New Jersey enrollment, and it is shared with Montclair Town and the Board of Education.
Okay.
So we do actually, though not directly to the town, we're required to report our enrollment to the New Jersey Department of Education as an independent school. And that actually happens around October 15th, so I don't know whether it was thinking that would be aligned with that process.
Other than questions of getting you to the current number of students and how we accomplish that, part of my question relates to the reason for not requiring a traffic survey was that the population of the school has stayed the same, and I'm not sure we can ignore a 100 pupil plus increase in what was previously allowed and say, well, that just happened and there shouldn't be a traffic study.
Well, I mean, there are a number of resolutions here, Mr. Chairman. I mean,
No,
one-
the 2014 resolution, again, reiterates this application is not intended to expand the school population or increase staff. It doesn't mention numbers. The 2004 resolution says nothing at all about number of students, but I would certainly posit that in order to change a condition of a prior board approval, you would have to have a formal action to do that. It can't be done unilaterally by the applicant.
The resolution you're referring to, again, which one?
It's the 1962 resolution. It's on the page 5 of that resolution is where the conditions are.
The limitation was 350?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think when the population increase was when we merged with Kimberley Academy, which was in 1974, and accepted girls. And so I know that since I've been at the school, the high school, which is 2015, we've been at the same kind of number at the high school. It's been in that that range. I'm imagining that the significant increase happened like around the merger time, which is 1974, when the girls' high school would have moved with the boys. So around that, I'm imagining that's a time when things
That's
changed.
my
Yeah.
assumption of what happened. I just don't know what legitimized that happening.
Yeah, no, so I'm just
I
saying,
mean,
so I don't,
the-
I'm pretty sure that's the cause of the increase. I just don't know how, kind of how that was addressed at the time.
Okay. Then my other question, the condition of the conditional use related to parking has this very peculiar provision in terms of how it's calculated. Does one space for each full-time staff, which I understand. And then it's one space for every 4 students eligible to drive. And obviously, as you go through the school year, that's an ever-changing number, maximizing the day before graduation. One year drops off, and then through the next school year, it's increasing. And I'm not asking you to try and do something, but I want to get a sense of, is there adequate parking? How many students typically drive to school, I'll say in the spring, when more students are prone to drive and the maximum number of drivers is at its most? If we swear you in, you certainly can.
You want to come forward?
Yeah.
Sure. Would you raise your right hand? You swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
David Flacco, 24 Brunswick Road, Montclair, New Jersey.
And just indicate your affiliation with the school.
I am the head of the upper school.
Okay.
So we only allow our seniors to park on campus. There are 115 of them. So at their peak, there would be 115 seniors that drive to school. I don't know the exact number because I don't know if every single senior drives to school, but that would be the most that would drive to school and park on campus.
I think when we did the calculation, I actually used 150 because we used the number that could drive.
Right, and the calculation in the ordinance is one for every
One.
4.
Four,
And
so, yeah.
and by the time you're a senior,
So,
virtually
yeah.
everyone's going to be eligible to drive.
So we'd assumed the senior year and some portion of the junior year could drive. We actually did go through and look at birthdays as well, and it came out with a pretty pretty similar number in terms of if we picked the December 31st and then we picked like a date in the spring, like, because in the spring our seniors actually go off campus too, so we have May term, so we picked kind of the period before May term, and it came out with a pretty similar number of about the 150. It wasn't wildly different. So I think we did it at various times to just average the number and got the 150.
Okay, but the current policy is only seniors can drive to campus?
Correct.
Yes.
If we imposed a condition saying that, would that be acceptable?
I'm sorry, could you say?
If we imposed a condition.
That's what we do, yes.
And then you would have a further justification to tell the juniors, you can't drive because the nasty Board of Adjustment won't let you.
Well, the only thing I would ask to stipulate is that once our seniors are off campus in the month of May, that juniors can drive to campus, because when juniors drive to campus, drive to school, they park in the surrounding town, and this would alleviate that and take them off the street by putting them onto our campus during the month of May when seniors are not on campus.
I have no further questions of this witness. Anything further from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? I'm assuming everyone's affiliated, but on the odd chance someone isn't. Okay. You want to call your next witness?
Yes, thank you. Robert Douglas.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Robert Douglas, 819 West 19th Street in Wilmington, Delaware.
Douglas, would you provide the board with your educational background and your professional qualifications?
Yes, I have an undergraduate degree from Harvard College in urban studies and a graduate degree in architecture from University of Miami, and I am a registered architect.
And how long have you been practicing architecture?
Since 2000.
Okay. And what is your current business affiliation?
I'm senior associate with McTavish Architects in Philadelphia.
Okay. Have you appeared before planning boards, zoning boards before?
Yes.
In New Jersey as well as other states?
Yes, here in Montclair, actually.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay. Your qualification's been accepted before all those boards that you've appeared?
Yes.
Okay. And your license is currently in good standing?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll accept him.
Thank you. Okay. Rob, your office prepared the architectural plans for this project, including the tree removal plan and landscaping plans?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're prepared to review those plans this evening?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. You were personally involved in preparing those plans?
Yes.
Okay. And did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation to assist with your testimony?
Yep, it's right over there.
There it is. Okay. I handed out copies of that before the meeting, I guess marked at 8-2,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan? Okay. Okay, well, why don't you take it away and walk the board through the plans using your PowerPoint.
Turn the lights down so you
Is this Mark working? Sounds like it. Okay. Just so I can be back here advance the slides. Well, I guess I'll start here. This is the elevation view of the science, the existing science wing that faces Lloyd Road. It is essentially expressed as 2 stories plus a basement on this level. And one thing you may notice actually is that the floor to floor of this building is really low. Katherine alluded to it a little bit in her discussion, but the big challenge of this building, and I'll just skip through these slides, but we can always come back to them. This is the existing in the addition, the Loop Road location. One of the big challenges of this building is that the existing floor-to-floor heights are extremely low. That lowest level actually has the ceiling about 7.6 and structure that's down at 7.2. That doesn't leave any space for any ductwork above the ceiling in order to provide adequate ventilation to those rooms. So the challenge that we really were trying to address in this project was figuring out how to get a reasonable floor-to-floor that's consistent with the technical requirements of a modern lab building without creating a mass that was too aggressive on the site. And so the solution that we've come up with is essentially to step down the lowest level. It actually steps down so that it's the same floor level as the academic center in the front of campus. Leave the middle floor consistent and step the upper level up, the second floor up about a half a story. Actually, it's much less than that. It's about 6 feet up on that top level. And then we've put math classrooms on the top level again to try to keep that overall building mass as low as possible. Just to take you through this plan, I wish I had a pointer. Yeah. These rooms down here are the physics labs. Anything you see in yellow is going to be a math or a health classroom. The robotics has been brought to the center here. It is actually in the basement of the gym currently near the pool. We brought that really back to the center to give it sort of a pride of place and some importance. And then these spaces down here, anything you see in this salmon color and this redder color are faculty offices, and then we've got the orange colors through the space are breakout spaces or meeting rooms. Sure, thank you. On the first floor plan, you see the green spaces are biolabs. The space in between, oh, sorry, these are the chemistry labs, I apologize. The spaces in between are the prep space that's sort of darker green is the prep space. That really gives you a sense of how much prep space is required for a contemporary teaching lab. It's roughly a third. And then we've got a couple more classrooms on this level. Along the back side, the west side, facing up the hill, we've got the faculty offices. And that concept gets repeated on the third floor or the second floor. So we've got classrooms across, or faculty offices across the back. Oh, thank you so much. Biolabs in blue, and then math classrooms through the rest of the building. The only other feature to point out probably here is that the chem/environmental science lab on the middle level actually accesses the roof directly. There's an existing green roof on the academic center, and so this allows them to access that space, which was designed to be used for science experiments originally, or for them to do a little bit of growing and working in nature, but because it's difficult to access.
Quick, where's Lloyd Road on this plan?
Oh, I'm so sorry. So this is Lloyd Road, as you can see in Bloomfield, and then this is the addition. So Lloyd Road, if you're looking on these plans, Lloyd Road is right here.
Thank you.
And again, this is looking sort of from Lloyd Road, but in the air. And this just to point out a couple of the features of the building. Roof access to the green roof, right through here. One of the features you'll see prominently on this building are sunshades, light shelves that bring light as deep into the building as possible. We provided some sort of raised planters. And then the mechanical equipment is located really carefully with the intention of using the new volume of the building, which steps up a little bit above the existing volume, to screen that mechanical equipment as effectively as possible and keep its volume as small and unobtrusive as possible. This gives you a little bit more of a sense of that. There was a color block on this at one point to help you see it, but the mechanical equipment is here. So it does stick up even above these roofs, but as you start to see, this is the street view, so that gives a sense in elevation. But of course, in elevation, your eye level is almost in the middle of the second floor. In perspective, what you actually see, the view from the mechanical enclosure, that tiny little thing there is the mechanical enclosure, and that assumes that the only screening is actually just provided on the side here.
What's the height of the mechanical enclosure?
So the mechanical unit above the new roof here,
right,
that's 9 foot 5 inches.
Okay.
So it comes up to a little bit less than 10 feet above the new roof.
So what you're seeing in that elevation is just it's the 9 foot tall.
It's the 9 foot tall.
If you go to the elevation from the street.
This is the elevation from the street.
All right, the next one, the one where you could barely see it.
This perspective, yeah.
Yes.
You're seeing the 9-foot tall.
That's the 9 foot, okay.
9 feet above this mass, but we've pushed it as far back to the north as we can get away with it, so that it's hidden by that mass as much as possible. And as you can tell, we studied that to within an inch of its life. We did look at an alternate version that provides an enclosure that comes up to 10 feet above the roof, which sort of, I think, meets the code depending on how you interpret the code. I think either one of them could be interpreted to meet the code. But I find this to be much more obtrusive. Makes a much bigger statement about the equipment. This, to me, this is the one that has a much much more consistent with what I think the intent of the code is. In terms of materiality, the bulk of the building is intended to be fiber cement panels. Those are the panels that are on the existing academic center and arts wing. The idea is really just to bring that same aesthetic around as much as possible, maintain consistency. The base of the building is going to include a water table of stone veneer. The intent there is actually to salvage the stone veneer from the existing building to try to match it. We've looked at a couple of very close matches in case that doesn't work from a technical perspective. As they start to salvage, it fails. But our expectation is that there's enough salvageable material on the existing building where we're tying into it that we should be able to provide that stone veneer. Tells an interesting story, I think. And then aluminum windows and metal panels in these tall vertical sections, which reference the proportion of the existing building and sort of the style of the existing building. This is just an image of the fiber cement panels that are on the academic center, if you're not familiar with them. This gives you a sense of where we're going with material palette. So the fiber cement panel, aluminum windows, and that stone. This is a photo of this existing stone that's on site. That's the spandrel panel. These renderings just give a little bit better sense of that than any of those black and white drawings do. So this is a view from, I think your eye level is probably at the top of the first floor, roughly here, to give you a sense of the overall massing of the building. This isn't a view that anybody would ever see, but I think it's descriptive of the building. This is a view from the courtyard, looking back at the building. So you see a lot of glass into circulation spaces from the courtyard side. This is a view driving south on Lloyd Road. So if you've just sort of turned off of Bloomfield and you're driving up Lloyd Road, this is as you go past the academic center. Really, I think what it starts to demonstrate is that you don't actually see this building even at that higher mass. Because of how much lower Lloyd Road is than the building, it's actually hidden by the academic center until you're very close to it. I think most of the time you'd experience it in your peripheral vision if you're coming up Lloyd Road. Coming down Lloyd Road or standing on the crosswalk, I think it has obviously much more presence. It is still pretty far back from the road relative to the gym and the academic center, and I think that makes a big difference in terms of the massing. I've actually, when we look at the landscape, you'll see that there are many, many more trees here. I made our renderer take the trees out because I didn't think he would believe me that the building was completely invisible from the street. That's what the rendering shows when the trees are located as they're actually designed. But we wanted you to actually be able to see the building. So, and then the last thing, we were asked to do a perspective from uphill. So from the neighbors who live at the top of the hill, looking down towards the building. That neighbor, this is actually taken from the back porch of one of the neighbors who came to the neighbor meeting, and they agreed that this is pretty much representative of what they see when they look down the hill. Just a bunch of trees, and you can sort of barely see the building through the trees. They have always requested that we try to keep the tree canopy down a little bit as they come through, because what you're not seeing in this view is their view of the New York skyline. And so they actually don't want really tall trees on the backside of the school's property because they want to maintain their view as much as possible. And I know they've asked the school to trim trees before for basically that purpose. So this just jumps back to the site plan just for a second. I'll take you really quickly through the landscape plan. I have included in the PowerPoint images of the trees. I don't think I need to waste your time with that tonight, but if you'd like me to, I'm happy to, just to give you a sort of a sense of it. But The tree removal plan, this shows the number of trees that are going to have to be removed. A number of them, and Ellie, who's doing the landscape architecture, knows the numbers better than I do, but a number of the trees are actually pin oaks or Norway maples that are actually on your forbidden tree list. So we're actually removing a lot of sort of pest trees from the site as part of this. No, but Ellie does. 18 of them.
18 Norway maples and 6 red oaks.
So it's 12 Norway maples and
Is that the total number of trees?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure it's right before I read it.
Yeah, so 18
Well,
Norway maples.
18 Norway maples.
Okay, I think we want to stop the testimony from the fifth row. So,
We,
I only ask because you have this exhibit that you're presenting now, and I haven't seen it, so.
Yeah.
if you want
Do you need me to?
I'm going to swear you in. Why don't you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address.
Elie Zainoun, 46 6th Avenue, apartment 2, Brooklyn, New York, 11217.
And just explain you are an employee of the architectural firm?
I'm an architect in both McTavish Architects, working on as the lead designer on the project. And there are 18 Norway maples that we are removing. These are considered invasive aliens. And we have 6 red oaks and 2 pin oaks. And we have 3 ashes that we're removing, for a total of 29 trees.
I'll move on to the proposed landscape. If I can make it go forward. So this gives you an overview of how the new trees are distributed around the site, and the intent really is to create an LA along the new road. We're providing red maples and sugar maples at the entry points, honey locust around the outside. Princeton elms start to come up. They're the largest specimens in the project here, and then sweet gum as we get a little farther up. And then back to honey locust for the last couple trees, and then we get into sort of trees with much smaller habits, so silver birches across the back, and then pagoda dogwoods at the top here, which are all on the Montclair approved tree list and local to indigenous to New Jersey. So that was we worked to make sure that those were all.
The total number of trees that are shown, new trees?
Actually 40, because we've got some sassafras in the courtyard, and a couple of extra dogwoods here on the outside of the building.
Okay.
There are a couple of other things I would just want to bring your attention to. There are some generalized planting zones around the building. Most of it's actually in the courtyard. A little bit of it's facing this outside area, which is a little flatter and potentially a student gathering space. But for the most part, the school prefers that we keep the landscape as simple as possible, mostly lawn. It keeps it, I think, in keeping with the neighborhood character, as well as easy for the school to maintain and useful for the students. That brings me to the end of my descriptions.
Well, a couple of follow-up questions, Rob. There was a comment in the engineer's report asking that we confirm that the new school or the expanded STEM building comply with ADA accessibility requirements. Can you confirm that it does?
Yes, I can confirm that.
And There was a comment in Ms. Talley's report regarding the screening around the mechanical equipment. I think there was a question about the boundaries of you providing a 10-foot tall mechanical screen.
The
shown on the plan.
preferred version actually is a 7-foot tall screen. That's the version that you don't see around the front of the building. And then the taller version is the 10-foot screen.
Right.
So.
I couldn't find the boundaries of the on the recap plan. Because we kind of limited the location.
Do you have a copy of our plans there?
I do.
I believe you showed it in your exhibit.
Oh, it's definitely in the exhibit.
What I would like to do is, it's really not, it's very hard to read it in your plans. So I'm glad that you showed it here, but if you can submit revised plans that clearly show the location of it, so that we have that on file, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Yeah, it's drawn, but it's not labeled, so it is hard to find. You're right. We absolutely do.
I don't like to guess.
I will absolutely give you plans that label that.
Okay, you finished? And I think you
so.
covered all the additional items I had. So, no further questions.
Hey, Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Would you put, I think it's slide number 4, back on the screen? Yes, no. Yes, that's slide number 4. So, first of all, do you know when the academic center and the arts building was built?
Academic Center is 2016? Yeah.
And so in terms of what you have proposed, I think you mentioned that in terms of materials, that there is a consistency between what you're proposing and with the academic and arts buildings?
Yeah, that's correct.
Say a little more about that in terms of where that consistency is and where the deviations might be.
Sure. So the consistency is, actually the rendering is probably the clearest place. Most of this area that's gray, sort of this mottled gray, is the same fiber cement siding as is on this building. So that is the place where it's primarily consistent. And then the water table that you see around here is consistent with the 1962 building. And so we've brought, the intent is to try to bring those two buildings together a little bit. And then the materiality of the windows is also consistent, but we're proposing a black mullion rather than the clear anodized mullion that's on the academic center. So that's a similarity in terms of shape and materiality, but not a similarity in terms of color. I think that's probably the biggest differentiator. In terms of the overall design, I think the other differentiator that's worth being aware of is the 1962 building has this very interesting overhang. The academic center made sort of a strange effort to imitate that, but made it much thicker and a little bit deeper. And we did a number of daylight studies and energy efficiency studies and determined that including that overhang was really not doing anything in terms of the building's efficiency and actually hindering the daylight quality inside the classrooms on the up top level. So in this version, we've actually preferred to keep it straight up without that overhang. It actually just, the interior of the building just performs better.
In terms of the black framing of the windows, do I understand correctly that the Historic Preservation Commission felt that that was a good differentiator in terms of the new building?
Yeah,
so
that's consistent with the report. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to the slide that I was referencing before. Thank you. So What would you say is sort of the overall architectural theme of the buildings on the campus?
The historic, and I'll call them historics for the sake of efficiency, but the 1962 buildings, they're actually built between 62 and 68, are very much a late mid-century modern academic building. That sort of S-shaped arrangement on the site is, I think, intended to be sympathetic to the topography and the views to New York and those kinds of things. And it is, suburban's probably the right word, that sort of stone look and the way it sort of sits into the site. The later additions to the building are much more sort of conventionally educational in a 2000s. I don't know that I would give them a theme.
Mm-hmm.
It would be kind of hard for me to define them as an art object,
Okay.
and give it a theme.
Mm-hmm. But it would be your judgment, because obviously this is a substantial addition to the campus, and that this would still blend or complement the overall neighborhood where the school is located, or would it feel different once this is actually constructed? Would this?
I don't believe that the neighborhood would notice this addition hugely.
Mm-hmm.
It fits with everything else on campus. And the intent really was to try to blend those two things together in a way that made, as much as possible, the sense that the school hasn't changed hugely. And, the building is sited intentionally to try to limit the number of places that you get a sense of its mass. And the materiality of it is selected intentionally to be part of things that people are already seeing.
Mm-hmm.
The building itself, all of the buildings on campus that exist as they are not particularly in keeping with the neighborhood's character.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's been the case since the 1960s when they were built.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's I simply raise it because it is, a keen interest of this board to work, whenever possible and wherever possible, to try to make sure that additional buildings that are being constructed are consistent with the overall community. I mean,
Yeah. I think that if you were to build this addition as a Victorian reference, because there are other Victorian buildings in the neighborhood, it would stick out like a sore thumb, and it would be the thing you saw, and it would be very strange.
Mm-hmm.
By keeping it consistent with the language that's on campus, what we've really tried to do is maintain the continuity of the community, which includes the school
Mm-hmm.
as a contributing member of the community, as much as possible.
Okay, so some of the specific questions about the building itself. So in terms of the roof, you have two sections, one where you have the mechanical equipment and the other one is a flat roof.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the access to either of those areas?
Probably a roof hatch into the, not probably, a roof hatch onto the lower area, and then a ladder. You'd need a ladder access provided to get up onto the higher level.
So there would be, at least in theory, no way for students to be able to access those areas?
No, I hope not.
You hope not, or would they?
The only reason that would be possible is if Jimmy left the hatch unlocked. Yeah, the students don't get through. Students don't access those roofs. And you can see down onto those roofs, and you'd know if students were up there because you'd see debris and stuff.
Yeah. I can certainly see that in terms of the area where the mechanical equipment is, that, there has the appearance of some kind of railing or something, at least on one part of that.
So this mechanical unit, this would be, absolutely, there is no way students should ever be able to have access to that.
Okay.
The screening is there specifically to provide aesthetic screening. And I imagine it, to a lesser extent, it provides safety and security for facility staff who would be up there maintaining the building. But it's not a public space in any way. The lower area here, that you're seeing railings here, this is an accessible space to the students under the supervision of faculty.
Right. So that's where I want to go next, is that lower area. So I understand that part of that, at least in terms of the existing building, is somewhat of a green area already for...
Yeah, there's a series of terraces and some green areas, and actually if you were to look at the Google Earth, you'd see there's also an interesting blue glass aggregate up there.
Okay. And is there currently a railing there as on your demonstration here, or is that a new addition to the...
There are currently railings there, yeah.
Okay.
The limited number of railings there.
And how high are the railings approximately?
They should be 42 inches.
I'm sorry?
They should 42 inches. I haven't put a tape measure on them, but they were built under current codes, so I would be surprised if they weren't 42-inch railings.
But sufficient to be preventative to students, because obviously there's another large area of roof.
Yeah, it's clear that students have not gone beyond that. There's no access beyond that.
Okay, because, safety, student safety would be paramount to us.
100%. Yeah.
And likewise, in terms of the new building, I noticed that there's also sort of a railing. It's a little hard to see in this, but yes. So
there's a slight elevation change between this roof and this roof.
Okay.
So we provided a ramp up here and a railing there. The parapet wall is actually what's providing the fall protection for those students out here. So you're not, in the rendering, for instance, you don't see a railing expressed because the parapet wall is actually providing that.
All right, okay. Thank you. All right, then, in terms of the what I think is the east side of the new structure, that's the orange. Would that be east?
This side?
Yeah.
That's the west, actually.
Okay.
That's facing.
I was trying to
towards the west uphill.
Excuse me. I know that you obviously have a lot of windows, a lot of glass. Do you also have glass on that west side, which would be facing the neighbors to the back? Is that correct?
Yeah, the west side glass facing the neighbors to the back. It's mostly glass, which is the current condition as well.
Okay. So what kind of lighting are you intending? I thought it's a reference to LED lighting. Is that what you're...
LED lighting throughout,
okay.
yeah.
And so how would that lighting would that lighting have a tendency to have any kind of an impact on the neighbors behind the school?
I don't think a significant one. First of all, the school is typically closed in the evenings. The lights would be on from the lead perspective. The lights have to be on occupancy sensors. So when the rooms are empty, the lights will be off. Typically, we specify a time clock on top of that, which would shut the lights off even sort of beyond that. And then the other aspect of it is that what we're not seeing is the edge of the property is way up here. So these lights, there's not a lot of light spread up to the edge of that property. It's definitely not any different than the condition is right now.
Okay. And I know that you mentioned, that you had a rendering of the trees from the neighbor's perspective. And would assume that foliage does drop in the fall?
In the fall, that foliage drops.
Okay, so that area would be more transparent?
Much more transparent.
Okay, than what you presented. Okay.
Yeah, that is true.
I think it's important for us to know that.
I should note that the neighbors who saw that have voiced their approval of this plan, though. So
that's fine. Thank you. So now there's another rendering that takes us into the new structure itself. Where yes, either one of those is fine. So you described the spaces as labs, workspaces. Just give us that summary again, please.
Yeah. So this is a lab. That's a lab. That's a prep space in the middle here. This is the Science Research Honors Lab, so it's a smaller lab that is for a smaller number of students. It's actually just a workspace, not a lab and lecture space.
Right.
Then these yellow boxes are math classrooms, and the pink boxes are the faculty workrooms, and then the circulation corridor down here, and the other circulation down this direction.
Okay, so all three levels are basically the same. I mean, it's not a lot of deviation, but obviously
Yeah, conceptually,
specific to the academic work that's being done in those settings.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
question I have is, and this goes back to the conversation that I was having with Ms. Davidson, in terms of the changed demographics of the school. Restroom facilities. I didn't see any reference to restroom facilities in your presentation.
So there are no restrooms in the current edition, or in the current science wing. We have added restrooms in this spot on 2 of the floors, just small, basically convenience restrooms. Our contention is that the restrooms exist in the rest of the facility are adequate. They were reviewed most recently in the 2016 academic center plan. So we meet as a campus, we meet the plumbing count requirements. So new restrooms within this building aren't necessary.
So, I mean, you have based on again, the presentation of the spaces, I mean, you have a lot of students that are going to be working in these levels.
We have the same number of students working in these levels as are working in the existing.
I understand that
Yeah.
currently in the current.
Yeah.
But obviously, in the current configuration of the building, they're in closer proximity to the restroom facilities. In this particular case, they're going to be further away from.
A little bit. The students that are down here have access to this staircase and the restroom facilities that are in the academic center. So they have access in 2 directions to restrooms.
So I'm going to ask a question. You may not be able to answer that. Maybe Ms. Davidson can answer the question. In terms of walking time from the classroom to the restroom facilities, about how long would it take to get from point A to point B, approximately?
Less than 60 seconds.
Yeah, I would say that.
So there are restrooms in the gym, and there are restrooms in the
Okay.
other wing.
This is not
Yes.
being picked up, and,
Okay,
okay, so,
Yes, less than 60 seconds I think is about right. I would have maybe said 75 seconds to be conservative, since I'm testifying on the record. But yeah, I mean, the restroom is here, right? So if you're in this classroom, if you're going to this restroom, you're walking down this hall, it's about 150 feet, down this half flight of stairs, and you're in the restroom.
Okay. And I would just, would say that, I mean, obviously, there's a question about convenience, but there's also a question about safety,
Mhm.
and so as students leave, what is a supervised classroom space, going to utilize other facilities, the question is, do they have safe passage both ways? And so that helps to understand what the distance is, because I didn't see anything on the renderings that addressed that, so that's helpful, thank you. And then, are there emergency exits from this new building?
Yeah, there's an emergency exit. These plans are probably fine. The primary exit is well, I'll call it the primary exit is here. The second exit is out of the back of the building in this staircase. There's a third exit point right here that's at the far side. We haven't counted that as part of the means of egress under our code analysis.
Right. And you did say that this building is ADA compliant.
Yeah, actually, one of the things we haven't really discussed, this level might explain it a little bit better, is that one of the things this does, for the first time, there's actually accessibility from, this is the main entry point of the school. There is currently no accessible route from this location to the gym, but through this building, you'll actually be able to take the ramp down through the academic center into this corridor and the elevator up to the main floor and out to the gym. So the gym will be accessible to the public for the first time since 1962.
So the elevator is already existing, or that's a part
The
of
elevator is
proposal?
part of the project. It's part of the addition.
Okay,
All right.
There's no elevator, and one of the weird things about the way this building works is that each of these wings is about a half story off from the other one. So when you come into this, you have to come up 2 short flights of stairs, then up another short flight of stairs, across here, down again, across the lobby, up again, and across the lobby. So there's a lot of and they're all short staircases, but of course for somebody in a wheelchair, that's just as bad as a long one. So the number of them is kind of appalling. So this allows a fully rolling route all the way through the building.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Ms. Harris?
To Ms. Talley's point earlier, the plans were a little bit hard to understand, so if you do submit any plans in the future, if you can clearly label everything, roads, rooms, existing versus proposed, so we could spend a little bit less time trying to orient ourselves to the plan. I know that you said the existing academic building, the floor-to-floor heights were too low for mechanical equipment. Can you talk about how that system works now with the addition? Are you making improvements to the existing mechanical system in the existing building?
Yeah, the existing building gets new mechanical systems. A lot of the mechanical circulation is actually vertical in this case, so we're bringing ductwork in vertically and limiting the amount that it needs to be distributed around the ceilings especially of the lower level where it's very low. And then we've eliminated, for the most part, spaces that require really meaningful ventilation, like labs, from those, except the exception to that being this chemistry lab here, which actually is able to ventilate right at this link point between the 2 buildings. And the bio labs on the upper floor, which are actually able to, they have access to the roof, so they have a less constricted ventilation condition.
Okay, and so the units that you have above the existing building, they're serving both the existing portion and the proposed? Okay, and those are just packaged rooftop units, gas-fired?
Yeah, so all electric.
Okay.
There's no gas in this addition except one gas line that runs to a Bunsen burner. So these are essentially mini split units, the condensing units for mini splits. And then this is a dedicated outdoor air system package unit. So.
Okay. And then the screening that you have, that you're proposing, what material is that? And is it shown on the renderings that you?
So, yeah, it is shown on the renderings. We have suggested it up to this point as basically metal louver system, very similar to what we did at the lower school. I would actually prefer that it be the fiber cement panels that is the rest of it, so that you just read the volume of the building rather than read the mechanical systems separately. But
and then how tall is the screening?
In this version, it's about 6'6".
Okay. What was the difference? You had shown two views of the mechanical equipment from Lloyd Road. What was the difference between?
Okay, so in this version, the mechanical screen basically picks up the edge of the roof, and so it provides a little bit of screening along the edge here, but hits the roof line of the addition, so that we're minimizing any visual impact of mechanical enclosure. In this version, what we're saying is we could bring the enclosure around. This fully screens the unit, but provides a much more significant visual impact.
So that additional height that you see in this view, that's just screening?
That's just screening,
That's not the
yeah.
equipment. Got it. Okay, and we will still have labs in the existing building, but they're not.
Yeah, the only labs in the existing building, though, are these bio labs here and this chem lab here.
And what's on the top floor?
The top floor is the bio labs.
Got it, okay. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
I visited the campus. I mean, my kids had taken swim classes there many years ago, and I went up into the campus. I think like my takeaway of the campus is like, I guess, the architecture and the way that it fits in kind of hides or makes the campus fit into the surroundings in that situation. And, you know, I hear that you're going to try to capture some of that material with this new extension. Is that the attempt here?
That's the attempt, yeah.
I mean, this is just, I'm just going to state it. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. I think we're in this like weird stage in life where black windows and black frames. I can't wait till that day dies someday down the road or something changes from that. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. But I want to move past that.
Okay.
On the trees, I see that you have a couple of maples and stuff like that. Are those at all like resistant to lantern flies and or like those? Because you know, I'm not sure the maples would be technically.
We do not have lanternfly specific tree resistance as part of our requirement. We could certainly look at that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Church?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to discuss a little bit about the sustainability elements of the proposed plan. In terms of stormwater management, I noticed that there was a comment in the application that bioswales and rain gardens are not part of the project. However, there are other elements of stormwater management. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You would get a better answer out of Mr. Perry, the civil engineer.
Yep. The other question, same thing about solar panels. I noticed there was a plan to install solar panels. Is that also part of this project?
That's not part of this project. The school's plans to install solar panels are independent of this project.
But we do have plans to install.
Yeah.
In this roof? In the new roof?
In these roofs primarily, it's not, I'm not associated with that project at all, so I can't speak.
On every other roof.
Okay.
And also at our middle and primary school. So we have it's been permitted by the town.
Okay. You have to come to a microphone.
So on pretty much every other roof except the gym domed roof. So the arts wing roof, the existing kind of wing to the side, and any available space on the academic centre that isn't a green roof or doesn't have the glass, there's a solar panel installation going on there. I think it's actually supposed to start next week. So, and then on top of that, we are also installing solar panels on all of the possible roofs at our middle school and all of the roofs at our primary school as well, as part of the same project.
Thank you. The other question I had was, I guess there was a comment about ventilation and improvement in, I guess, air quality. Does the new labs have any type of fume hoods, or they're not required? They're just
No, the labs have. See if I get this right. There are 2 fume hoods in the chemistry labs and 1 mobile fume hood that's available for other labs as well.
okay. And that will discharge to the roof, the exhaust?
Those discharge to the roof exhaust, yeah.
Yep.
The mobile one is recirculating, just to be clear.
Yep. And I'm not sure if this is, because the fire alarm, is that part of the same project improvements?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fire alarm is being brought up to code. I'm not sure what beyond that you would be asking about specifically.
Just adding to the existing fire alarm panel.
Yeah,
I
it's
guess.
added to
Yeah.
the existing fire alarm panel.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit about means of egress. I guess there was a IBC study done, a code study?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Just a matter of course for the project.
Yeah. And so you're confident I guess the areas in the basement will comply with the means of egress requirements?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, because I noticed that, I guess especially in the robotics side in the back, you will have to go either down a level or up a stairs to get to the nearest exit.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah, okay. So that will comply with the requirement?
Yeah. There's no requirement that the that you not have to go up and down a flight of stairs in order to get to a point of egress. The upper floors obviously always have to do that, so.
Yep, understood. All right, thank you.
I want to go to the landscaping, and it's, as has been pointed out, your plans are difficult to deal with, but there appear to be, okay, you gave us a count of the types of trees that are being removed, but nothing on the plan shows which of those trees are where. Is that correct?
That's not correct, actually. The tree planting plan that's submitted most recently, the landscape 1.0, each tree is tagged with a letter here, a letter code, and those letter codes are consistent with the key that's provided on that plan.
For the trees that are being removed?
For the trees that are being removed,
No.
yes. Actually, possibly not in the version that was submitted, because that was work that was ongoing when we did the submission before Thanksgiving.
Okay, because there appear to be trees that you're removing that don't need to be removed, and then there are a couple towards the front, I think there are trees there that you're not showing as being removed. But let's deal with the back area.
Mhm.
I mean, the trees that you have with the X's, I assume those are all being removed?
Yeah, so many of those trees that you're seeing that look like they might not need to be removed are in really poor condition, and either possibly going to come down or will probably come down on their own between now and the start of construction.
Okay. And you have a plan that we just hasn't been submitted that shows what those, which
Calls
trees
out
are
what
which?
those trees, species are and their, the caliper of those trees, yeah.
Okay. And then, you know, and I kind of have the reverse concern that the grading that I suspect will be necessary for the road, and I'll ask the engineer questions about that. There's some trees relatively close to the road that I would be surprised if the grading that's going to be necessary is going to enable those to stay. But I'll ask the engineer how he, you know, the depth of the grading, the width of the grading, and then try and relate that to your landscaping plan. But as the road curves around the building going towards the street, just from the photos of the property and the aerial, it looks like there are trees in that area, not showing any trees being removed.
I'm looking for the best plan to discuss that on. You're talking about this area of the road?
Yeah, and back a little further, but yes.
Back a little further, yeah. The trees, to my recollection, the trees that are in that area don't meet Montclair's definition of tree, which has to do with the caliper size and the height of the tree. So they're relatively small.
Okay.
If we're not showing them eliminated, that was typically the reason.
But, well, you're showing what I'll call in the development area several, I'll call them small trees that I would be surprised to me as being removed. And I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, my sense is the vegetation that's there is going to be gone. Is that correct? Or not? I can't tell what's staying and what's not staying because it's not shown at all on the plans. I understand not being the tree removal, but I still want to know bushes, whatever you want to call them, what's staying and what isn't staying.
Yeah, I mean, we could provide a landscape demo plan that would be clearer on that point.
Okay, and then two comments, which you don't have to, well, one, you know, you've clumped together under shrubs, both shrubs, the inkberry as an example, and perennials, which are, and normally people separate them, and so there's a sense of what's going where. My other comment, I would not plant trumpet vine if I were you. I made that mistake because my wife thought they looked pretty growing along the parkway, and that should have been my hint of, if they're growing there, but they will attack the trees you're planting them next to. They will spread all over. They will proliferate wildly. I have more trumpet vine plants that I'm cutting down every year from the one little one I planted. They look very nice, but it will be an ongoing nuisance.
Okay, we'll
I'm not
review that.
requiring you to change it. I'm just
We'll review that
alerting
selection,
you
though.
from practical experience. Okay, any
yeah,
other
thank you.
questions from members of the board?
I do have one question. In the package that was distributed, there are fence types?
Oh, yeah, that was a question. Excuse me. This was in response to a question that was in one of the memorandums. The retaining wall, it should have a fence at the top of it based on the height of it, from a safety perspective. And the question was what type of fence is that intended to be. Along the back side of the road, we were expecting that to be split rail fence, which is the idea of disappearing into the landscape as much as humanly possible. It's at the back side of the property. Anywhere where there's retaining wall, there's no retaining walls that are high enough to require fences in the front of the property. But there are a couple of places along the lower side of the road where the retaining wall grows into a location where the engineer feels strongly that there should be fall protection. And in those cases, we're proposing the same decorative metal fence that we've used at the lower school and the middle school in previous projects.
And are there split rail fences on other parts of the property today?
No. But the location specifically, this isn't the best plan to be showing this on, I'm sorry. Basically right in this location here along the backside.
I assume this will be part of the engineer's testimony?
Yes. It's one of the reasons it's that far down in the presentation.
Okay. I'll just say, I don't think it's in keeping with the design of your building. It's a little rustic for the rest of the property. It's something maybe team should reconsider.
Okay.
I think we're trying to balance the fact it's a very wooded area back there. So I think putting the ornament, it's a balance between, and it's such a different area from the front of the building. If ever you've walked, it is a really steep wooded hill back there. And I think we were trying to pick something that wouldn't really sort of stand out, particularly when there are no leaves on the trees and it's something that neighbors see. So we were trying to kind of blend in with the wooded portion of the property. So we did have a discussion about whether we use the ornamental fence, and that really would kind of stand out and look, as you look down, look quite different because it's quite far away from the actual buildings where the wall is. So I think it was a compromise between finding something that would blend in with, if you actually go to the back of our campus, it's a heavily wooded area, and finding something would kind of work in that setting as opposed to kind of where. And also I think the intent is to sort of like hopefully plant some kind of shrubs along there too, and trying to like think about ways that we can sort of provide other barriers as well. And sort of like certainly that's where the creepers are going down the back of the walls as well to try and soften some of that. So I think it was an ongoing conversation with us in terms of having something that tied into the rest of the campus and matched everything else, or did we try and blend into the wooded area and have something that really didn't stick out as much for neighbors looking back? So it's sort of one or the other.
Well, is that all shown on the landscaping plan? The shrubbery, the fence, the
No, a lot of
walls?
that came, well, the shrubbery is on the landscaping plan.
Where this fence is located?
The fence is not, partly because that came up as a part of, in response to the review comments. We just got those yesterday, so we haven't had time to revise drawings for that. I've revised as much as I could, and sort of to talk about intent, but the drawing revisions aren't complete.
So, you said that you're going to plant shrubbery along the fence where this is located. Is that shown on your landscaping plan?
Yeah, so the landscaping plan shows this line of shrubbery along the wall here.
I thought that was dogwood trees.
Well, there's dogwood, the highlighted ones are dogwood trees, and then the black planting below. I think it's actually clearer on the print drawing, because you can actually see the tags when it's not.
It's just hard to see because you don't see the road. Where's the road and where's the?
I don't know, there's something going on with this image, honestly, because it's not how it looks. Yeah, the projector is dropping a lot of lines out of this image. Because the road and all of that site work is on the print drawing. And it's actually on the screen as well. Yeah, so the road along here, and then this series of shrubs and their call outs, and those tie down to the.
Okay.
Okay, I just have one question I forgot. The 1962 approval required landscaping along the rear property line, and your plans, because all your improvements, but I'd like you to look at what's there now and determine whether that needs to be supplemented at all. It's different than what was envisioned in the approval, which I don't mind. We're many, many years later. But if looking at that in terms of the intent of what that condition was and seeing whether any supplemental landscaping needs to be done along the back of the existing parking area and the homes that are, right there behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look at that.
Any other questions for the board? To go through the formality. Are there any members of the public who have questions for this witness? I've always waited for one of the client's other witnesses to come up and ask questions, but. Okay.
Bill,
Ronnie?
I have a question. Is there a member of the public? No, but I have a question about I want to make sure I understand the screening for the rooftop equipment. So what you're proposing is the screening is going to be, to have the lower level, it's going to be, what did you say, 7 feet?
7 feet, yeah.
7 feet, but the actual, what is it, a cooling tower?
The dedicated outdoor air unit is the larger one, yeah. The dedicated outdoor air unit, yeah.
What did you say?
Dedicated outdoor air unit. It's basically the unit that brings the outside air into the building. It includes a enthalpy wheel.
Right, isn't that called,
heat exchanger.
did you reference that?
It's not technically a cooling tower. The other ones are basically cooling units for split. The smaller ones are
the one
cooling
that's
units
10 feet tall.
Yes, the larger one.
So that's the top part of that is not going to be screened?
In my preferred version, no. Because I think it's actually less visible unscreened than it is screened.
Well, what is it going to look like?
The unit itself?
Yeah, because it's also going to be visible from the back.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's unscreened in the
the
back.
unit itself, the best description for it is probably it looks like a sea box, it's a metal container painted on all the sides.
Could it be painted to match the rest of the screening?
We typically specify them to be painted to match the screening, or we specify them like gray so they disappear as much as possible into the sky.
Okay. Okay.
I'll paint it whatever color you want it.
So what you're gonna go with the second alternative or the first alternative where it's lower rather than the second alternative that you showed?
Yes.
Which is fine. And I would just suggest that we require the taller elements that exceed that height of the screening material be painted to match.
Yes, that would be great.
It's a resolution, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. And do members of the board want to push through or take a short break? Mr. Trembulac, you want to call your next witness?
Yes, Brian Parry.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Yes, Brian Perry, Perry, Work address 103 College Road East, Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay. Mr. Perry, would you provide the board with your educational background, your professional qualifications, your current business affiliation?
Yes, I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, license number GE 45920, as well as I'm licensed in the state of Pennsylvania. I am a certified municipal engineer and lead accredited professional in building design and construction. My educational background, I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, a master's degree in water resources and environmental engineering from Villanova University. I have practiced in the field of civil engineering for 22 years, 18 years of those licensed. And I've appeared before several planning and zoning boards throughout the state of New Jersey. Not this one particularly, but several throughout the state of New Jersey.
Is your license in effect and in good standing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you're affiliated with the Pannoni Engineering, correct?
That is correct, and we are the we prepared the excuse me, the ALTA survey, existing conditions plan, and site plan for this application.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I offer Mr. Perry as an expert in the field of professional engineering.
Your license is current?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we'll accept him.
Okay. Brian, you know, you're familiar with the plans prepared for this project and prepared to review them with the board this evening?
Yes, I'm actually standing in for the engineer of record. However, I am the project principal for my firm, and I was involved in the design, coordination, and preparation of these plans.
Okay. All right. You want to would you review the plans with the
Sure.
basic site plan?
So I'll walk through. Unfortunately, my plans and exhibits are not as exciting as the ones you just saw. They're mostly from the site plan set that was submitted with the application. I've got a few, sprinkled some color in a few of them, so I will try to walk through these succinctly. Thank you. The exhibit that's up before us, this is, for reference, is CS 0101 area and vicinity map from the site plan. The project, the site area is kind of cross-hatched area. It is, I'm going to say, located, the property, the school is located, I'm sure you're aware, is the south central part of town. Just to the west is Verona Township, bounded by Parkhurst Place to the north, Lloyd Avenue to the east, and residential properties to the south and to the west. We, as you heard before, block 302, lot 16. The zoning district, as we heard, falls within the RO, Mountainside Residential Zoning District, where the existing private school and building addition are permitted as conditional, or permitted conditional uses. I'll go to the next slide. This is a copy of the ALTA survey, it's sheet 1 of 2, submitted with the application. What's highlighted in red is the subject property. This is showing the ALTA survey for all the properties nearby that the school owns, but the subject property again being block 302, lot 16. Totaling approximately, I think it's, 6.66 acres. As part of this application, the lot itself will remain unchanged. There are no lot line changes, subdivisions, property boundary changes. Everything is occurring within this lot, this property. The site topography, it's been discussed previously. I'll just kind of go over it briefly. The site currently slopes in a southeasterly direction from the rear of the site towards Lloyd Road. High elevation is approximately elevation 540 with a low elevation at Lloyd Road of approximately 455 elevations. From an environmental standpoint on the site, there are no known streams, wetlands, flood hazard areas, or riparian zones. Next slide. Next slide is our demolition plan, CS 0201 from the site plan set for reference. I think we were just looking at this a little bit before. Real briefly, the demolition plan is really highlighting or indicating those elements, only those elements that are being demolished for the purposes of the proposed project. That is the building addition and the road around the building. So things like, I'm going to say sidewalk, hardscaping, other features incidental, again, to the proposed improvements. Next slide. This is sheet CS 1001. I'll actually jump to the next slide. I have an illustrative kind of version of this. This is, I'll speak to the site from this plan really. This is just a color rendered version of the site plan at a larger scale, so you can see the property in the context of its surroundings. As far as the project proposal, we discussed the 2.5-story building addition shown in red on this plan here, approximately 8,850 square foot gross floor building area. Project itself, and the other improvement that we've been discussing is the new access drive around, I'm going to say the south of the building, running around the back of the building. The total project disturbance is approximately 1.5 acres. I'm going to speak to some setbacks, building height, and coverage. So setbacks, existing nonconformities aside with the existing building, the building addition in and of itself, by itself, conforms to all building setbacks. Building height, 35 feet and 2.5 stories are permitted, 34.5 feet and 2.5 stories are proposed. Coverage on the site, impervious coverage, 70% maximum impervious coverage is permitted. In the proposed condition, we're going to have 53%. Principal and accessory building area coverage, the maximum permitted is 25%. With the proposed added building footprint, we are at 24.99%. As far as access, parking, and circulation, as we discussed, there's three, I'm going to say primary access drives existing. 1, 2, and 3. 2 of them are ingress, 1 of them is egress. The egress one is the one in the middle. With this application, we are proposing a new access drive, although it's off of an existing curb cut that's currently used for pedestrian access. The drive itself is approximately 600 feet long, and it's going to be primarily used for bus circulation in a clockwise direction. So it's a one-way circulation around the site. It improves traffic circulation in that the existing configuration of the roadway access to the site results in, I'm going to say, some dead-end circulation towards the back. There is a circulation that obviously allows vehicles to pass through, but it's all congested up in the front of the building. This new access drive will open up and allow for circulation, as you heard before, clockwise around the building, not to the rear. I'm going to say the drive itself is actually 16 foot wide. We reduced that down from the original submission. It was 18 foot wide, so this access drive was 18 foot wide with a adjacent sidewalk. It's now the current submission, I think it's the November submission I'm referencing, it does show it at 16 foot wide. I think there was a comment on addressing the width or not labeling the width. We actually had a label. Unfortunately, we had a label. We had one label, and I think there might have been an overwrite. So it is a 16 foot wide drive, and one of the reasons we reduced that is really in consideration of a few things, is impact to impervious surface coverage, additional site disturbance, and earthwork in general. We did check maneuverability, circulation, which I'll address in a later slide, showing that we can adequately get buses, but also emergency vehicles around this drive. I know that was another comment. One of the other modifications from our prior submission is we did eliminate, there was once we had proposed a branch off of this drive at the peak, heading to the lower lot from the rear of the building. Just from a logistics standpoint, construction standpoint, it was made for a difficult kind of access construction. We're already dealing with retaining walls, which I'll describe in a few minutes, but that was eliminated. So we have just the one main 600 foot long stretch that connects to the upper lot. The other thing to note about the access drive is it was additionally designed with, we do have a 4 foot wide bump out along what I will call the drop off area. It's approximately 100 feet long or so. Just important to note, I don't think we addressed it or was discussed before, but as far as buses, so the distance up to the drop off would allow for approximately 6, I'm conservatively speaking, 6 to 8 buses to queue on site. If there ever was a peak time for buses to come through, allows for, again, 6 to 8 buses to queue on site off of Lloyd Road up to the drop off. The other thing to note, as far as from a site standpoint, the design of this access drive, it's designed with full face curbing, so vertical curbing, 6-inch curb on the building side of the drive. We do have an alternate, we have mountable curb, not an alternate, but on the opposite side, mountable curb. The reason for that, and I think there was a comment, I believe, in the engineer's memo, or engineer's review, kind of questioning that relative to drainage. Drainage is all pitched away from the building. The reason for the mountable curb is to allow for passage of vehicles in an emergency scenario. In other words, if we have either a bus, vehicle queued, either pulled off, it just allows for better maneuverability. At 16-foot wide, that should be plenty width to pass two vehicles, but the mountable curb just allows for, I'm going to say, from a safety standpoint. So that's what we're proposing. Additionally, there's a little shoulder, it's a grass shoulder, but adjacent to the mountable curb, about 6 feet from the curb to the wall. That portion is then pitched back towards the road, so everything's contained. The only last thing to note, sorry, I keep saying last thing. The last thing to note with regard to the access drive is a realigned crosswalk on Lloyd Road. Currently, the crosswalk dumps pedestrians right in the middle of the drive, but that's because it's a pedestrian access today. We are realigning that crosswalk to align with a new curb ramp we'll be putting in on the south side or planned left side of this new, the vehicular part of the access drive. So again, there's a realigned crosswalk here.
While you're talking about that, I think there was a comment in Ms. Talley's memo about the plan not depicting what sidewalk or whatever there is to the south of
the residence?
crosswalk. Well, yeah, I think, Janice, I think your concern related to the existing sidewalk, where there's
On the east side of the road, yeah, where it comes up.
So we have a crosswalk connecting, so there is a crosswalk connecting here, and there's a set of stairs, and there is a linkage to get you from this crosswalk to a curb ramp that then crosses the drive and then, leads to the sidewalk adjacent to the drive.
You're talking about the other side.
Yeah, it's going to hook up to the existing ramp on the other side of the street? You're not changing where it...
Oh, yes, correct. On this side?
That was my confusion.
Yes, this does not change. That point does not change. It's really just being realigned on the west side of Lloyd Road. That's correct. I'll get into it on the grading part of things, but while we're on the subject on the site plan, I'll discuss briefly off-street parking. While we're not proposing an increased demand for parking, we're not increasing staff, students, so there's not an increased demand. We do propose to reduce the existing parking by about 3 spaces. Not about, there are 3 spaces. So at the end of this parking lot in the existing condition, there are 3 spaces where the new access drive comes in. So we're actually reducing parking. However, we still have adequate parking based on the parking calculations that we discussed previously. That specifically being the parking requirement that is for the school is 121 spaces. That's based on staff, and as was previously mentioned, the number of students that are able to drive, I think the number we had from the school is 155. So 121 is the required spaces. With the loss of the 3 spaces I mentioned, we'd still have 174 spaces. Now, that's accounted for between on-street, or I'm going to say on-site, so on the subject lot, 76 spaces, 44 spaces available in Lloyd Road, and another 54 spaces available in what's known as the Walden Place parking lot adjacent to the athletic field. So there's 174 spaces available. I think there was also a comment noting that the requirement for visitor parking was not shown on the zoning chart. And that's based on our understanding that visitor parking is not specifically required for a high school. So we're showing the parking on the zoning chart that's required. We already talked about no new staff or school, so again, no new parking proposed. While we are reducing the parking by 3 spaces, we're not otherwise impacting or proposing any of the existing ADA parking. So there is ADA parking distributed throughout the site, on-site. I think there's a space or 2 on Lloyd Road and also in the Walden parking lot. We are not touching any of the existing ADA parking and therefore are not proposing any new or additional parking with this project. There's also a comment relative to EV parking. It is noted the school has a couple of EV parking spots here. Again, we're not proposing any new parking, so don't believe that any new EV spaces are required, or accordingly, they're not proposed on this application. Next slide. So the next slide is the grading plan from the site plan, CS1501, 1501, the grading plan. So site grading and topography, as shown on the plan, we have a maximum side slope of 2 to 1 a 2-on-1 horizontal to vertical, and retaining walls, as you've heard plenty about, to minimize the disturbance into the existing slope. So specifically, disturbance into the existing slope. So there's a slope off the on the back side of the property, sloping towards the building. This new roadway, the new access roadway, the 600-foot-long roadway, traverses the site. I think there's a question before. A gentleman had a question on the slope and how we're managing and, I'm going to say, tackling the existing slope. So the slope is, admittedly, is steeper coming down. So we have a maximum slope of 12% on the roadway. We have some flatter areas along the drop-off. The 12%, where that's coming from is we're kind of pulling that actually from the residential site improvement standards. The reason for that is 12% is the maximum grade permitted for residential neighborhoods, which also consider access by school buses and things like that. So that's where we came up with a maximum. That said, that maximum still exceeds the slope that we have coming down the slope in the back. And so that's where we introduce a retaining wall. And so what we're doing is we're actually cutting, I'll use the term cutting into the slope as we start going around the corner of the building. So we do have a little bit of, I'm going to say, some cut into the slope. It starts a little bit lesser, I can say, on the south end of the building. At its peak or at its maximum is around maybe the midpoint of the existing building, and then it matches back up to existing grade. So that is the reason for the retaining wall. At its maximum height, at around station 500 or so, the retaining wall will be about 16 feet, 16 and a half feet. And with a, I guess with a safety fence along the top, 4-foot safety fence, we're talking total height of maybe 20 feet, 20.5 feet. That's not the entire wall, that's at its maximum. It goes down to as low as 4 or 5 feet at the beginning and then graduates up and goes back down. There are other walls throughout the site on the opposite side of the drive. They're not as large. I think they are compliant. One of the comments was to provide additional grading information on the plan, top of wall, bottom of wall elevations. We do have them on the plan, but admittedly, we should have more at some of the point of tangencies, point of curvatures, and at the maximum high points and low points, as well as the other walls that are not labeled. So we've agreed to add those labels.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
With all that walling and so forth, that's going to reduce that so that you're not, buses get up there easy then?
Yes.
It's not a steep climb?
No, so right now, the current slope coming down the hill, like if you took just straight off the plan, it's right, 2.5%, so say, or 2 to 1, I should say.
Okay,
So that's about 50%. The slope's going to be 12%.
12%.
Which is a manageable, it's still steep, but in this part of
But the
New
buses
Jersey.
can do that?
Yes.
A fire truck could do that?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay, and let me have what I have you.
Yes.
As your roadway comes around the back of the building?
Yes.
It splits, then it comes down on Parkhurst side, Parkhurst Place side, am I correct in reading these plans?
So the new road comes around the south side of the building, up the west side of the building, connects to the existing parking lot. Overall circulation for the site does continue around towards Parker's Place, and then
Okay.
back down to where.
And that's where the buses, after they do whatever they're gonna do, that's the way they come out now?
They will continue through the
So-
existing parking lot down and out the egress, the
Is there
existing
a
egress.
curb cut down there?
Yes. Yep, and I'll show, actually, on a few more exhibits, I'll show those turning movements, yep.
Okay, thank you.
And can you just point to where the tallest part of the retaining wall is?
Yes, sure. I can point here. Do you want to go to the grading plan? So the highest part of the wall is approximately this location, approximately station 500. Okay? Yeah, and that really what that's a function of is, we're going up at a 12%, which is steep, but it's flatter than what's there. So we're trying to chase the grade, but can't quite keep up because of a flatter slope for the roadway.
Did you consider terracing the retaining wall?
We did actually consider terracing the retaining wall, and we discussed that. The concern or the issues with, as you can imagine, we have the other issue of when you terrace it, we really need to terrace it. We need to keep at least 4-foot spacing, I believe, to avoid, I'm going to say, the additional variance in terms of the wall height. We already have a variance for the wall height we have, but it won't help us there. But by doing that, by pushing into the slope, we're actually creating more disturbance, more grading, and possibly more tree removal is the concern, and more earthwork.
So the maximum height permitted for a retaining wall is 7 feet.
Mm-hmm, sure.
I don't have an idea of how much of the extent of the variance. So do you have a graphic showing where along the extent of that retaining wall it exceeds that 7 feet height?
I don't have one here. I can generally point to it, and we'd be happy to provide one in a revised plan. We can absolutely show that. I would say generally it's going to be roughly, I can't read what that station is, but roughly this point. I'm going to say up to about close to where it meets the existing parking lot. This is the part where we're really cutting into the slope here. Where it starts is about 5 or 6 feet, and then it transitions as we cut more into the slope to about the 7 or 8 foot wall height, and then at its peak, as I mentioned, around station 500 is where we're at the 16 feet, and then we match back to existing. So the wall reduces in height at some point where we meet the existing parking lot.
So it's going to be a 16.5-foot retaining wall plus a
4 foot.
4-foot fence on top of it. So
At its peak.
It's 20 feet.
Yes.
Whereas 7 feet's required, because we have to add the 2.
Yes, no, understood. And yeah, really, and again, the thought was, like I said, with terracing is with a normal slope behind the wall, that would be we'd probably start there first. I think by doing that, by stepping into the slope, we're actually creating more of an issue because we're coming down at about a 2-to-1 slope. By stepping back, we're actually cutting even further, and the wall height actually it'll go down because we're splitting it in half, but I don't know how much it'll be reduced, as well as we're creating more earthwork, more soil removal, things like that. And tree removal and site disturbance.
And what's planted between the what's planted between the retaining wall and
the road?
And the road.
So I'm not sure if the landscape plan calls it out, but there would be something, it would be either a grass surface or a river rock type thing for maintenance.
Okay.
So yeah, either a landscape stone or landscape, grasses. Excuse me. I think, so we discussed the wall. Yeah, I guess there was a question about where the road, excuse me, abuts the existing head of school's residence. And right now there's I'm going to say a pedestrian connection. With this road being cut in, as you can imagine, we are creating a grade differential between the driveway of the home and the road. So there is a retaining wall there. And again, by the other reason to make it a little bit narrower too is we create a little bit of a buffer where we have, like I said, a 5 or 6 foot wall at this location. We can go to the utility plan. So the utility plan is sheet CS 1701 from the plan set. I'll be brief on this. Utility services, I think there was a question on utility services. All utility services for the new building are going to be fed from the existing building with the exception of sanitary and storm. Storm, there's roof leaders coming off the building and tying into a new collection system, which I'll describe in a minute, as well as the sanitary laterals, which are new. There's a new sanitary lateral coming out to an existing, I believe it's generally in this location. So there's a sanitary lateral that comes off the building and to an existing sanitary lateral system here.
Engineer had a question as to whether there would be any new water, gas, or electric laterals.
Right, and so to that point, that's all going to be fed through the gas, electric, any other of those services will be fed through the existing building, so there'll be no new laterals for those services. Next, actually, no, you can leave it, I'm sorry, you can leave it on this slide. I'm going to touch it, while we're on this side, I'll talk about stormwater management. So this project, because we do disturb 1.5 acres, and we are greater than a 1/4 acre increase in impervious, this is a major development project, requiring us to meet not just the municipal code, but the municipal code references the state rules, New Jersey Administrative Code 7:8. Our stormwater management system is designed consistent with those requirements. Specifically, for the building addition and the associated site improvements, we have a permeable paver system with subsurface stone and pipe storage. And for the road, the new road system, we have what I'm going to call green infrastructure manufactured treatment devices that lead then to two subsurface stone storage areas. So the design here, one of the nice things about the current stormwater rules that were adopted say in 2021, and then we had an enhancement where we have to look at projected rainfall amounts. One of the nice things about the newer rules is they dovetail with LEED and sustainability in that they require you to meet stormwater management requirements with green infrastructure. Both of these systems proposed meet the green infrastructure requirements of the stormwater management rules. So they're both small-scale green infrastructure best management practices, or BMPs, and they meet the standards as required. We do recognize that the engineer, while they did a review, that we're still waiting on a formal review from them of the stormwater management system. And upon receipt of that, we're in full agreement to work with the engineer's office if they're to address any technical comments they might have. So they did conduct a review of the full site plan, but my understanding is they have additional review on the stormwater management system. Next slide. Next slide is the lighting plan, CS2002. We have 13 pole-mounted lights proposed, as well as 18 bollard lights, all of them generally complementary to the building architecture. For the proposed new surfaces, so the roadway surface, adjacent sidewalk, and any of the hardscape surfaces around, the lighting is maintained at the acceptable minimum levels of 0.5 foot candles. There was a comment about some minimum lighting levels adjacent to the building. I think at some of the building entrances of 0.2 and 0.3. What this doesn't do, unfortunately, the light point plot that's shown on this plan does not consider the effect of existing building mounted lighting, which I believe there is on the side. So I actually think with those incorporated, I actually think we would meet those requirements. However, I mean, we would like to maintain the lighting levels as we have them. We don't want to be too intense. We want to, maintain, I'm going to say sustainability, but also, I'm going to say not provide any light pollution or any additional light glare to adjacent properties. If needed, I guess we could try to figure out what the existing lighting is on the building, but there is existing lighting at the building entrances. And again, I believe that would suffice at those minimum levels that we're showing of the 0.2 and 0.3 foot candles.
So we're seeking a waiver, is that?
I would say we're seeking a waiver based on the point plot that we have, yes, only because I don't have those lighting, those building mounted lights aren't factored into the model. That's correct.
Okay.
And then the next slide, we've talked about the new access road and maneuverability, circulation. We presented with our application 2 sheets, 2 turning movements, one for a school bus, one for a emergency vehicle, a ladder type fire truck. What you're seeing here is we've kind of colorized the wheel path so you could see this is a school bus coming into the ingress side going clockwise around the building. The red lines reflect the wheelbase, the wheel path of the truck. The gray hatched area of the new road, that's the pavement. The wheel path stays within the curb line, and a bus can make a complete circulation and come back out the site at the egress.
I have a question about
Yes,
that.
yes.
Isn't that an ingress driveway that you have the bus exiting?
It's two-way existing.
Oh, I thought when you testified earlier about the circulation, that cars.
I may have mistaken. I know I said there are 3 existing. Did I say 2 ingress and 1 egress? I may have said that. I think it's really, this is a 2-way ingress. This is an egress. An ingress, sorry, ingress, and this is an egress. So this is ingress only, egress only, and this is 2-way existing.
Okay.
Actually, the one by the library is ingress in, and the one in the middle is egress.
This is actually important. We want to
Yes,
make
so the
sure
one-
that it works.
The one by the academic center.
Can you point to it with the?
That one, yeah, that is ingress.
Right,
The one in the middle is the egress.
egress.
And then the one at the end is 2-way.
This is 2-way, yeah.
Yeah.
So ingress, yeah, circulation comes up, there's a drop off, and then back out.
Okay. Thank you.
And the next slide is, again, a turning movement in the same direction. Just the next one? The next one is this is for the fire truck. So this is a standard movement for a fire truck. I say standard, that is going clockwise around the one-way circulation pattern. And again, the red is the wheel path, and we're showing that we can stay inside the curb line. As I mentioned before, we do have a mountable curb in the event a vehicle would need to roll over that in an emergency scenario, but in the standard or typical condition, we're showing the fire truck can make that movement. We did prepare an alternate exhibit that was not part of the original submission package. I think there was a comment asking, I think the engineer had a comment about whether or not the fire truck could make a reverse movement. In other words, I guess in an emergency scenario, if something happened to be blocked off or whatnot, a truck can come in and make a counterclockwise movement and come out. So that's what this is showing.
And I have a question related to this. For both the bus and the fire truck exiting the site, you showed them turning right. Can they
Yes.
turn left?
They can. And yes.
Normally would turn left.
Yeah.
So,
And we could provide that movement.
that
Yes,
was why,
not a
why
problem.
doesn't it show a left-hand turn?
Yeah, we can certainly show that, and same thing, if anything was coming from the other direction, we can, that's why this radius ingress as well can come in, but you're asking about, yes, turning out, we can absolutely provide that in a revised submittal package.
It's a pretty wide drive, that one as well.
Well, I think what this shows, is it pulling into the wrong lane? If it's, you see what I mean? If exiting the site, it's a really wide turn and it's kind of coming.
You're talking about, so this is the reverse movement, and the exiting, you're talking about exiting here?
No, if they're exiting on the other, go back to, okay, the
So this is the standard movement, so truck coming from the right lane, and then, again, turning right. But yes, we could show the movement that you're asking for, turning.
What's the next slide?
Next one is the reverse. Yeah, the engineer had asked us to evaluate.
I understand.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I'm going to briefly touch on any outside agency approvals. We know we need to get Essex County Planning Board approval and Soil Conservation District approval, and those applications will be submitted and approvals provided as a condition of approval. As far as a review, professional staff review, we are in receipt of the latest review correspondence. Our office, I know, has spoken with the staff professionals in the past. We did provide a prior point response to each of the review letters and memos. We will do the same with the current ones we received with the revised submittal package. Generally, we do acknowledge and agree to comply with the remaining conditions to be satisfied. I think there were comments, both technical and requesting some information to be shown on the plans, and we're in agreement with that.
So is there anything in the latest Boswell report that we have not already complied with, or we will not comply with in
No.
the future?
No.
Okay, thank you. Are you finished?
Yes.
I just have one follow-up question relating to the driveways, because can you just talk about the new driveway and the variance that's triggered?
Yes.
And just give the details on that.
Sure, yes, and it was touched upon. So this has to do with the distance between driveways. So today, where we have the 3 existing driveways, there's an existing nonconformity where the separation between driveways is supposed to be 150 feet. There's an existing nonconformity between at least the first 2 driveways closest to Parkhurst Place. The proposed new driveway and the existing driveway immediately to the north creates a nonconformity where, depending on how you measure this, in the past, in other municipalities where there's a requirement such as this, as well as I think Rhesus, you measure from center to center of the drives. If you measure that, it's 145 feet. If you do, however, measure more conservatively edge of driveway to edge of driveway, we have 128 feet. So either way, we are requesting a variance from that requirement, so that separation. We did look at the possibility of trying to move this drive, if we could move it over, to avoid having to request that variance. There's a couple of complications with that. One is we have the existing curb cut, which we're trying to make use of. Also, even that short little distance has a much larger impact on the slope that we're dealing with. Just moving a few feet over, the slope of the road continues to go up, as well as the slope of the topography continues to go up. It actually makes it a shorter distance to make up a greater change in grade.
Okay, no further questions.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Perry. I just have a couple of questions for you. So one of them is going back to the number of trees that are going to be removed as part of this project. Do you anticipate that this would affect the erosion of the property overall?
The tree removal, no, and nor the grading. I mean, what I didn't show here is the soil erosion sediment control plan. One of the approvals I mentioned that we're required to get is from the Soil Conservation District, which they're going to review the plan for that very thing, is to make sure that we have adequate soil erosion and sediment control measures, not only for during construction, but in the post-construction project. We may have to do things like slope stabilization blankets for things, I'm going to say upslope of the retaining wall, but that's how those will be addressed.
And as of sort of the current moment in time, there is no evidence of any water damage in the existing buildings. No water that flows down that slope. And
I would defer.
Yes.
There's not.
There's not, so they're dry.
Yeah, we looked extensively for that because it's hard for me to believe.
Yeah, it is hard for me to believe too. But thank you. And then you mentioned that in terms of the principal and accessory buildings on the property, the limit is 25%, and currently 24.99% is accounted for. So I'm clear that there's no potential of putting any additional buildings on this lot. I guess the question is, while this administration the current administration is committed to maintaining the student population to around that 450 number, that doesn't necessarily mean that a future administration would necessarily share the same view. So the question I have is, the existing buildings, in your judgment, would any of them be capable of being built up to have additional levels placed on them?
I would suggest that's certainly possible. I mean, I would defer to the architect on that, but.
Maybe from a technical capacity, no, they're not structured that way. They'd have to be rebuilt in order to be taller, and then we would immediately fall foul of the zoning code, which limits us to 35 feet. I think adding a story to any of these buildings would be more or less impossible.
Okay, including the new buildings, the new building.
Yes, including the new building.
Okay, all right. Then you mentioned, I'm a little unclear in terms of the number of parking spaces. So, talked about 159 spaces are on the property, and then I think you mentioned 170-something number of spaces. I guess that includes...
Yeah, so the parking, it's kind of a shared parking scenario that I believe is, excuse me, a subject of a prior agreement, both with the town and, as is typical, with the school having multiple properties, is the number was 174 spaces.
Okay.
Are available, and that's between both the parking provided on the site and Lloyd Road that's available to them. I think there's an agreement, there's 44 spaces are available, and then on the Walden Place lot that's near the athletic field down further south is 54 spaces.
So I think we heard, testimony that when the seniors, so I guess especially in the second half of their academic year, have more access to vehicles, that there's a potential for 115 students that could have vehicles. So does that mean that more vehicles? I mean, what is your assessment in terms of sort of the normal utilization of the spaces in the first half of the school year as opposed to the second half? I mean, is there a significant swell in the number of spaces that are required as a result of that?
As far as what the current operations are, I guess I would have to defer to the school for what that is. I mean, I know the requirement is based on that number of students that are driving. It's 1 per 4 spaces required, but yeah, I know you're asking a little bit of a different question.
Yes, we have never had an issue with a senior or a faculty member not being able to park on our campus at any point in time during the year.
So there is sufficient space available. When you say on the campus, you're talking about the parking lots
those
three
lots,
provided as opposed to the street.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And if I could note, Mr. McCall, if you don't mind, I mean, our plans show that the required number of parking spaces based upon the ordinance is 121.
Mm-hmm.
We have
174.
which is almost 50%
Yeah.
more than the ordinance requires.
Yeah, and which I think is great. It's just that, when reference is given to the number of spaces that students require, it raises the question about, well, what does that mean in reference to other utilization requirements for parking? The other, just in terms of the retaining walls, and specifically the 16-foot retaining wall section. What's your sense of the longevity of a wall of that height?
Well, a wall that height, and again, a lot of it's the best construction practices, but the longevity, the typical life cycle of a wall is that, not so much the height, but again, it's the constructability and type of walls. I'm going to say 50-year life cycle.
50 years.
But again, there's walls, there's life cycles with everything, and depending on good maintenance practices, things that they can last much longer than that. That's just a typical, from having done reserve studies and things like that, that's a life cycle that you would typically select. So yeah, things tend to last longer than that if they're maintained properly.
Okay. Yeah, I really sort of wondered because again, with the slope that's behind it, and potential erosion, would that
And actually, that's a good
create
point. One of the things I didn't mention on the grading plan is, you're right, the slope behind it. One of the things we're doing with the wall, and I failed to point it out on the grading plan, is we are creating a swale behind the wall, so it's a diversion. So water's not just running off the top of the wall and creating erosion. We have a drainage system behind the wall, and as well as we're dishing the topography just behind the wall. Is little, creating as little disturbance as we can, but creating, again, a little bit of a diversion swale, and we're picking it up with some catch basins so that we're not, again, just dumping water onto the adjacent properties or onto the road itself.
All right, okay, thank you.
Could you provide in your resubmission a section of the wall?
Of the wall, yes, we
showing
can do that.
Thank you. I'm not sure who can answer this question, but understanding that buses will be queuing up on the new road, can you talk about the circulation of the students from the building to the queued up buses? Will they be picked up in the parking lot?
With the buses queuing in the back, our students would exit through the gymnasium.
Okay.
There's a door at the far south side of the gym that they could use to access.
Can you point to it with the
Sure.
pointer, please?
There is a door here that they could use to get up here. There's also egress here, an exit back here by this hallway, which could exit as well. And they could drive,
So
or they could walk
is there a
down.
drop off there?
There is,
Okay.
right in here.
And that's long enough for how many buses?
We sized it, we couldn't make it too long because we were then further cutting to the slope, but it accommodates 2 buses at a time.
2 buses, okay.
That's 2 buses, 40-foot long, assuming a 10-foot gap between the buses.
Okay, and is there any accommodation in the parking lot for pickup at all?
The parking lot back here?
Yeah.
Yes, there could be.
Okay. Thank.
Yeah, there are several exits to the back of the building which would be accessible to our students.
Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of the existing road, you said that's a two-way, the road farthest to the north, you said that's a two-way road. How does it work with people turning left onto Lloyd Road? Is there ever any conflict there in terms of people waiting to turn?
It's actually close enough to the light that it's very. It's actually very close to the light, so when you come down the hill, it's actually very apparent when people are waiting there. So I must say that they're normally pretty good about letting people in, and it really doesn't. It tends to move pretty swiftly, particularly because Carline tends to run the other direction on Lloyd. So when you're coming out, that part actually moves pretty smoothly. I mean, it really is dependent on the light, and in some ways it's good because it means the queue goes back up our hill rather than back up on Lloyd. And when that light goes, that traffic moves pretty swiftly. And people are, I think because the people coming down that road are really familiar with the traffic pattern, they tend to leave that clearance so people can come out for the light, because it's really the biggest the biggest kind of, not issue, but the biggest thing that slows things down there is really the light onto Bloomfield, which is a no turn on red. So, that light, people are going to stay at that light until it turns. So, busy times of the day, like in the morning, that light has an extended green left arrow onto Lloyd, so that really helps clear the traffic. And in the afternoon, it has an extended green, and it has a crosswalk there too for pedestrians. So it tends to have a pretty good time to clear the traffic on Lloyd. So, when that light turns, that traffic moves. So it's not as if, the kind of the sort of bottleneck for that road isn't the turn, it's the light. And it works, it functions well, I'd say. It's not a road that when that light turns, it actually clears the traffic. It doesn't, everyone gets to turn when the light turns. It doesn't cars aren't left not being able to make that turn.
So if you've got buses kind of queued up at that exit, waiting to turn left, and then you've got cars waiting to turn right onto Bloomfield, you don't see a conflict there?
No, that driveway's left clear because we actually have personnel on our car line. So we actually have 2 security people who work our car line. So you're not allowed to block that driveway in the car line. It stays open, and they actually keep people moving them down. So I've never, even in the existing conditions we have now, because that's how faculty come into school now. So people coming to work come up that drive. So it's pretty regularly used because that's how everyone's accessing that parking lot right now. So right now, and that's how faculty are leaving as well. So it is a driveway that actually functions reasonably well, the two-way portion of it.
And when are faculty kind of entering and exiting the parking lot? Is it the same time?
It's similar time because it's not like a...
Yeah, I would say the busiest time to enter is between 7:30 and 7:45. The exit is actually better because the student pickup is any time between 2:55 and 3:15, and faculty don't generally leave until after 3:30. So that is completely cleared of all of our families who are picking up their kids at the end of the day, and those buses leaving at that time are either leaving usually before the car line. They might leave at 2:30 or 2:35 for an event to get to a game, or they might leave at 3:15 or 3:20, sort of after the busyness of it. Yeah, in the morning they would be leaving after 8 o'clock when it's cleared.
But right now they're sitting in the car line.
Right, correct. So they'd be sitting up back, waiting.
Okay, thank you.
That help.
Mr. Caulfield?
Maybe I'll get you in a sec. Quick question. Did people or the residents park on Lloyd Road between, I know there's an easement here, they can't park between 7:30 and 5:30, but do residents use the Lloyd Road to park?
Yes, usually residents will be parked there until 7:30 in the morning. Usually the first 5 or 6 northernmost spots on Lloyd Road, and then sprinkled in and out on Lloyd Road, but not a major number, but it's mostly 5 or 6 of them, of those spots right closest to Bloomfield Avenue until 7:30 in the morning.
Because we had, there's across the street, there's a common, like a place that has issues with parking. I'm not sure if they know about Lloyd Road. Like
That's where the majority of that's where those people are coming from, are those apartments.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. How much cut do you think you're going to take out of that hill? How much cut are you taking out?
Okay, elevation-wise, cut is probably, it varies, of course, but I mean, at its peak is probably approaching the 15, 16 feet at the peak. It graduates from where we start the road at Lloyd Road to 0 to, again, going up the slope, yeah, I'm gonna say around 16 feet. One of the things we will provide, and will be part of a site logistics plan and hall plan, is the earthwork volume. We didn't provide it previously because we didn't know if we were going to have any revisions to the plan or whatnot, but we'll provide an earthwork volume as part of the revised submittal as well.
How would a snowplow get up that hill?
Snowplow?
Yeah, and let's say let's throw like I don't know 12 inches on that. Would a snowplow be able to get up there?
I would say yes, based on the condition of the the existing drive is a steep incline up the side of the slope. Also the grade that we selected, that we used, or that we chose, was something that's comes out of the residential site improvement standards. And again, while this isn't a residence, those slopes are meant for not just passenger vehicles, but the other ancillary vehicles that would be accessing those roads. So things like snow plows, maintenance vehicles, school buses, garbage trucks. So that slope should be a traversable slope for a snowplow to handle.
Did the driveway in the front, was that explored as a way of using, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, this is only for buses that are used for the sports that are happening after school. It's about where they're supposed to queue up and et cetera. And, you know, we're making a large, I don't know, I feel like we're doing a big, huge swap for this, buses that, you know, that don't come all the time, technically. It's only after school. Did we explore the driveway in the front in some way of maybe widening it or making it easy for buses to queue there instead of doing this major thing?
So I think there's a couple of things. I know we did look at that in a previous iteration. There are some other complications with the front. Sorry, let me use the pointer. You're referring to this drive along here, correct? Yeah. So we did explore that. There's a couple of things. Yes, width. There are some other awkward turns. Believe it or not, this turn looks similar to that one, but this is a tighter turn here for
Could we explore? What about exploring that and opening that up? What about what about making that much wider in some way?
Right, and the other thing I was going to mention, there's steeper slopes that you can't see in this plan, but there's some steeper slopes, which, yes, we do have back here. But there's other, I think there's some landscaping there as well, but there's other complications there. As well, the other thing we were trying to do with this drive is not just the buses, but also the emergency part of it, the safety for the school, providing that circulation around. Like right now, this is all, I'm going to say, exposed to, you know, some sort of emergency, I'm going to say, issue. There's no access on this side of the building, which there's not today, but this also is providing that emergency support.
Let's talk about that emergency support. We do have a parking area in the back there that does get us access to the back of the property, technically.
This?
Yeah, but it doesn't get us into the back where the road, where the proposed road is. But that is all, you know, that is all wilderness in that area right there.
Right.
If fire broke out in the gymnasium, I would imagine that the fire would be fought off of Lloyd Road, not necessarily this new driveway that's coming in.
Well, Lloyd Road to an extent, right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 600 feet of exposed.
Plus, it's a stone
distance.
building. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of fire, I don't know how bad that would look like in the end. I mean, this is my perspective. I mean, the traffic is bad, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the AM, 2 hours in the PM. That's 4 hours per day, times that by 5 days a week. If you take the school year, maybe it's 110 days minus the 365 days a year. I mean, it's like, this is a giant, you know, I don't know, a giant grab just to get a driveway up there. I think there's other ways of maybe looking at exploring the other aspects of the driveway in the front. And that's, you know, you don't have to answer that, but that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Mr. Church?
No.
Mr. Vieira?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions around the underground stone storage facilities.
Yes.
So you have 3 of them. Specifically the ones in the proposed roadway, are those meant to infiltrate water or just to reduce the velocity as, you know, it's
Both.
going? Okay.
So the systems have to be designed, you know, the requirements are that we infiltrate. We have all of those, all of the above. We have to provide water quality, we have to provide peak rate reduction, so reduce the amount of, the rate at which runoff is coming off the site, reduce not just from the proposed, but from what the existing condition is, as well as we have to recharge a certain amount of water. So we have to recharge what's recharging today. So the purpose of those stone beds is to do all of those things. The water quality comes in with those manufactured treatment devices that I mentioned that are green, considered green infrastructure. So we polish, clean the water, and then put it into the stone storage beds.
And as far as maintenance to those facilities?
Yeah, so there's a maintenance plan that was submitted with the application that what'll end up happening is that'll get put on file, and I believe it ends up getting recorded at the county, and the school will have an obligation to maintain these facilities going forward.
Okay. Also, a question around porous asphalt or pavers that are proposed.
Mhm.
Is that also meant to extend to the new sidewalk that goes along the road? roadway?
It is not. It's really meant for the area that we have it, just putting, it's the permeable pavers are in this location, which happens to be one of the flatter areas. We aren't extending it on the rest of the walks because we have a lot of experience with both porous asphalt and porous concrete and the like. Porous asphalt is much easier to work with, but there is a limitation on it in that it's not recommended in steeply sloping areas. Otherwise, normally, actually, I might have even suggested using it on this drive. It's just, it's really not recommended in slopes that are greater than 4 or 5%.
I guess there was a question around snow removal. So was the recommendation, your recommendation to plow from the top of the hill as opposed to going up, or?
Well, I mean, that is certainly a consideration. I would say would be something what's easy for the, I'm going to say the operator, the snow removal service is how I would, I guess, caption that. That would certainly be one way. I mean, it seems to me that snow plows access the site on the east side today. If they were doing that, they could come the opposite way. It would certainly be easier to traverse down the hill than up.
Thank you.
So, following up on that, where would this snow end up?
So there's a couple things. We do have a shoulder. It's a 6-foot shoulder between the wall and the road, as well as there's some space between adjacent to the building.
Okay, and following up on Mr. Caulfield's question about the cut you'd be doing, I know you said you haven't done the calculation, but I'm assuming all that excess material will be removed from the site?
I would say yes, it would need to be exported based on the size of the site. There's really not a place to put it. So there would be an export and there would be then a haul plan.
Do you have a sense of, 1 truckload, 100 truckloads, just rough order of magnitude? I know you haven't done it, but on the other hand, you know how much you're cutting into the hill.
I don't actually at this time. I mean, and this doesn't help. I mean, I know a typical dump truck does would carry 10 to 15 yards of material. I mean, I think it's going to be several. Admittedly, it'll be several.
Okay, and then I want to go to the small parking area that's right behind the building.
Here.
Describe how access to that is occurring, and there's a follow-up to that, but start with how one is getting to that parking lot.
So vehicular access to that parking lot is, I'm going to say, it happens the way it happens today, where somebody comes in the drive and there's actually, it's hard to see in this drawing, there's almost kind of what I'll describe as a fork in the road where somebody will peel off left and park, or I believe the dumpster enclosures are back here as well. I think this is where the garbage truck access is, yes. Yep.
And
actually that's, so one of the things that this drive does afford is that a garbage truck can actually come up here. It provides a little bit better access for a garbage truck that could actually, if it needs to.
There's no
pull
way
forward and
you
back
can
up.
make that turn if you come around that way.
No, it wouldn't make the turn. It would perhaps back in if it needed to back in, depending on how the truck accesses the dumpsters, if you follow what I'm saying. In other words, if it picks it up from the front, it would have to do it from the front.
They would have to go down past the fork.
Yes,
And
yes.
then back in.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they back all the way from here, all the way up. So would be a shorter distance of backing up.
Longer distance to travel.
Longer distance to travel,
Okay,
yeah.
so then my understanding from the plans, currently people drive up and park in the big parking area behind the school. Will they still be able to do that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and my understanding is there's school buses coming in and doing drop-offs in the morning, is that correct?
Yes.
And they're going to come in the new drive, and then
So there's the little buses come into the mini loop in the front right now because they can make that loop. So they actually come in come into the door, don't they? They come in like from the main drive all the way at the end. All the way at the end. Like that one, don't they come down? I thought they come in the main one and they do the loop in the front of the arts wing. Yeah, they come up and they do a drop in the middle. It's just that that's not possible for a big school bus to go round. And right now, so we have, I mean, for us, it's more about the buses that load. So the buses that come in and drive off and kids get off and go, it sort of tends to function a lot more successfully. So there's a couple of buses that come in, they drop off, and they drive on and they go to a different campus. The issues we have, like when we have, and we do actually have like a fair number of trips and things that leave in the mornings. They come and they'll just park on Lloyd, and they'll be there until 8:30. They're not going anywhere until the kids come on and get on the buses, but we don't have anywhere else to stage them. So that's kind of the issue in the morning, is when those buses stuck up. The ones that kind of come and pull off, yeah, they're an inconvenience, but the ones that like, well, we have to stage things for longer periods of time, that is really tough on those mornings, and you certainly know when those things are going. And in the afternoon with athletics, there's just more of that type of situation. So you can definitely, when the athletics buses are there, you definitely know, I mean, that's fairly regularly in the afternoon, and they do really kind of create an issue in terms of there just isn't that much road to access for the pickup situation.
For cars making the left onto Lloyd Road going towards Bloomfield Avenue, how much room is there between the stop bar for the traffic light and the driveway coming out of the property?
You're referring to the existing driveway coming out?
Well, yes, but it's going to be the continued driveway coming out.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, I guess I was just clarifying, you're not, okay. I mean, the distance to the stop bar, I don't have the exact dimension on here. It's approximately, I'm scaling based on other known dimensions on here. It's probably about 60 feet or 75 feet or so.
I would say it's about the length of a car, just having done it multiple times. And my question is, the school buses that are now coming out there, which is going to be a new phenomenon, how aren't they going to have to go beyond the stop bar when they make the turn out, which is going back to the question of showing buses making that left turn? So you're going to do that drawing and show rather than speculating, but I'm making the point. I want to go back to what I said much earlier. I am not willing to vote for a waiver of a traffic study. I think, partially going back to what Mr. Caulfield was saying, not sure there is a problem. I'm going to say it that way, that we're trying to address, and I'm not sure this isn't making what's not a great problem now, because certainly my observation is, yeah, cars back up onto the driveway when they're trying to exit, and but we're now adding buses to what's coming out, and there's no, but I think having an evaluation is important for us to evaluate. As Mr. Caulfield said, there's an awful lot of work being done for not an awful lot of traffic being accommodated. And I think maybe you should have a discussion with the fire department as to what they would actually do in a fire. That may be helpful to you. It may say they'd never go back there anyway. I don't know what they'd say. Okay, but let me go back to some questions. One, an observation: you have one accessible space in the Walden Place parking area. I'm not sure how a handicapped person gets from there to the school in a very real sense. It would certainly not seem to be a easy access, in terms of normal ADA requirements.
It's not for access to the school, it's for access to the field.
Well, even there, it's not, I think you have to provide when, my other question is, I would think, given the number of parking spaces, you're not having the number of handicap spaces that you would normally have in a parking of this many, and I'm very reluctant to grant an approval that's not consistent, and I know technically you're, other than eliminating the 3 spaces, you're not changing the parking, but I suggest you look at that as to, boards have been sued, is my concern, for not requiring ADA, and all kinds of entities have been sued for not having sufficient ADA parking. My other, you have a comment that the 2 existing electric vehicle charging stations meets current need. That is not going to be true, whether it's not true 1 year from now, 2 years from now, or whatever. Your parking is all not located convenient to electric, but I'd suggest you're looking at that and not saying you need to provide the stations, electrical vehicles charging stations now, but some thought, and if there are site improvements to bring the electric, you should consider adding those. The reality is going to be you're going to need more than the 2, and how many years from now, I don't know, but it's going to be sooner rather than later. The stormwater, I want to wait for the engineer's review as to whether, there are questions I could ask, but they may be satisfied, and don't want to spend time. And then there were a number of comments in the Boswell current letter requesting further information. I am not content to have you say, yes, we'll meet all of those, because there are a number of those that might require changes to the plans, and which I would like to see. And we're, so just, at this point, I'm not willing to vote in favor. I don't know how you want to proceed tonight. I don't know if board members have further questions of this witness.
I don't know if there are any questions, but, I think we hear what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, and I think we'd like the opportunity to come back with revised plans, and we'll provide a traffic study and address these concerns.
You don't get overly worried. The addition is nice. That those are not, not hearing from other board members any significant issues with the addition. It's, and to repeat what I said to the architect, I cannot relate the landscaping plans and the grading plans in terms of what trees are being removed. It appears to me more going to have to be removed than are being shown there, and then the landscaping plans don't really address the extent of the clearing, grading that is going to occur along the road. They show the single line of trees with the shrubs and perennials right along, but the clearing is going much beyond that. I want to know how you're proposing to landscape that area.
Also, too, if any of the renderings are going to be revised, if we can have the retaining wall and the fence shown on the renderings clearly, so we understand.
Yeah, and the dimensions, because that relates to where the landscaping is going, because taking literally the landscaping plans and where the wall's going, they're in the same place, and they clearly are not going to be in the same place, and I don't know if they're going in front of the wall, behind the wall.
Chair, can we have a?
Yes,
I realize it's late, but just a short break. And I think we're going to propose something that might simplify this quite a bit. We'd like to amend the application to simply seek approval for the building addition. And we will not seek approval for the loop road or the new driveway or any of the other issues that have, caused concern. We may come back at a later date after doing further study based upon the board's comments, but we would simply ask for the site plan approval related to the building addition and, of course, the various improvements around the courtyard and in the area of that, but remove any approvals relating to the new driveway or the loop road.
Let me meet you halfway there, and obviously the other board members should speak up. I think I would be comfortable giving you preliminary approval. I think I would like to see what the plans look like. It's just, this is a big change. It's a big change by eliminating, but, I would like to, there are some comments in the Boswell letter that relate to that, but but are the other board members comfortable giving a preliminary approval tonight for the addition?
Yes, but I think we'll need a revised site plan to understand what that looks like without the road improvements, and also the other issues that we raised to the architect we'd like to see addressed on revised plans as well.
Okay. Let me do conditions, and then we'll let someone make a motion, but let me do conditions, and then we'll have the normal discussion. But what I'd like to do is to, okay, let me ask you, are you comfortable if we modify the other approval to?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about the doctrine of unintended consequences. I don't know exactly what we're doing here. I mean, we're
Okay.
improving the building. I mean, we're taking the roadway out. The variance for the retaining wall height goes. I'm not sure where that left with the exception for the lighting, but we could defer that as part of the final site plan. So you, in theory, could grant preliminary site plan approval for the building improvements. I'm just not sure of the nature and scope beyond the building of what we're approving.
I think that's what we're approving.
Just the building.
Just, I'm trying, okay, there are, it is the building and their associated changes to the walkways that are occurring as part of that, because they're building the building over some of the walkways. So, I may actually. Just bear with me a second. I think I can actually maybe define this. So we're approving the building and the site improvements that are shown between the gym and the main building. I think will cover, that's going out to the street there, but I think that covers the changes you need for the building. Is that correct? I see everyone nodding, but if Alan or someone can say yes.
I'm going to defer.
Sorry, I just didn't want to do it without the microphone. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I think what the conditions I'd like to do is that the number of students not exceed 475, the number of faculty and staff not exceed 100, to somewhat redo the report that that you're required to submit each year on your student population. A copy of that be provided to the planning office. Not doing anything to that, so that's not relevant. That the portion of the rooftop equipment that goes above the screen be painted the same color of the screen. That the stormwater improvements, which are obviously much more limited, but still there, adhere to the operations and maintenance manual that will be prepared or is prepared, well, will have to be re-prepared if one was prepared. And I'm not thinking of anything else we need to do for that. You know, for the final, it'll show the landscaping, it'll show any revisions to the stormwater that are necessary. Will address any of the relevant conditions that are contained in the Boswell memo that relate to the addition as distinguished from the road. Anything else? And if not, start discussion with Mr. McCullough. Yeah, we're not as part of this granting a waiver of the lighting requirements.
Well, the
which is not to say you can't come back and say, because of X, Y, and Z, we need it, but we're not, as part of this, granting any relief from that.
Yeah. I think, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll be very brief and just say that, I mean, I think in principle, I can agree to the building. At the same time, I'm a little bit uncomfortable because if we had just been presented a plan for the building, we might have had a different type of examination of the proposal. And so now we're sort of caught in a sort of peculiar space because we've had this much more comprehensive presentation. And now we're being asked to sort of set all the rest of that aside and no longer have that be a factor in our thinking. And my concern is only that in in the moment, there might be something that we will have forgotten to address. And I don't know how we get back to that if in fact, post this meeting, it occurs to us that there was some element to this building that perhaps we should have looked at differently in light of it being separated out. But in principle, I'm in agreement, because I think in principle, I think the building is a good addition to the campus. I think it contributes to the mission of the school itself. I don't see it as being a detriment to the neighborhood. I mean, there are issues, obviously, with traffic and all of that, but if the census of the school is not really increasing significantly, then that sort of makes some of that moot. So that's really sort of my commentary.
Do you think your concerns could be addressed during the final site plan approval, or?
Probably, I guess.
I mean, and this approval is going to be subject to final site plan approval,
Right.
obviously,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
So I guess I would say yes to that then.
And I would approve the preliminary site plan based on what we've seen today.
Mr. Caulfield?
I think the only thing that's for zoning is the driveway, and since that's eliminated, I feel like everything else should be okay. But, you know, like, I feel like schools, like, when the schools have to get out, the traffic is so, it's a lot for every school. I feel like, in my kid's school, I see it a lot all the time. I just, trying to find solutions to help that and to look at it are always, you know, things, you know, they always have to be reviewed and understanding on that. But, you know, I thank you for thinking about that and thinking about the long term and all that stuff. But, you know, I do thank you for thinking of the short term and the long term and what that applies to the school and stuff like that. Thanks.
It entered. We can talk after. Okay, Mr. Church?
Yeah, I would approve the preliminary site plan approval, as we discussed, and wait to see what comes forth.
Mr. Vieira?
Yes, I'm also in favor to approve the preliminary site plan approval for the building, not for the roadway. But regarding the waiver request for the traffic study, does that also, I guess, is that outside
Well,
of the
if the
scope?
D variance is eliminated, that requirement under the ordinance is no longer required.
Understood. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to do that differently, just because I don't want to go into
I think I
a
know why.
deeper issue is, you know, the concern I had with the traffic study dealt with the new driveway and the impacts and how that was going to change circulation or potentially change circulation, and I wanted that evaluated. So I don't think that's necessary for the addition. We're putting a condition on that's basically keeping student population and staffing at existing levels with some ability for some minor fluctuations, which I assume occurs regularly, as to you don't have the same exact number of students every year. You know, I think, you know, the addition, you know, this is a positive addition. It's reflecting where higher education is today, and, you know, the facilities that were built, mostly built 50 years ago, you know, clearly were not designed for today's technical world. And, you know, so I think this can be a valuable addition to the school, and, you know, is not going to in any way adversely impact the neighborhood. And, you know, so, and, you know, I think, as we've all indicated, you know, we want to see, you know, the final site plan to make sure everything is as we expect it to be, and still have the ability to further condition if necessary. And with the conditions I mentioned before, does someone want to make a motion for preliminary site plan approval?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, for preliminary site plan approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Mr. McCullough?
Okay, if you want to call the roll. just,
Chair, Mr. Harrison?
yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Caulfield?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
And Mr. Vieira?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think you'll be ready to come back at our January meeting? I'm just planning for our purposes.
And if we need it, you'll
Yes.
grant an extension of time until that date?
Absolutely, yes.
And just now that we've carried two matters to then, what, do we have other things that are coming our way?
Well, not for tonight. We have a couple of minor applications, but nothing major on the list coming up. So, that's where we are.
And have we heard from the Board of
No, we
Education?
have not. I knew that question was coming up.
Okay, wish everyone happy holidays. I wish you best with your soon-to-be new child. And someone want to move to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.